Haskell Thomas for the land acknowledgement.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Haskell Thomas. I am the Coordinator of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice for the municipality of Chatham-Kent, and I'm here tonight to offer a territory acknowledgement and to share some information about an important treaty as we enter Treaties Recognition Week in Ontario. And I offer these types of acknowledgements as a form of gratitude to the people who have stewarded the land that we're on, and as a reminder of the responsibilities people who settle in this region have to honor the land and respect the ways of knowing and being of the people who have lived here with this land since time immemorial. So I'm sharing a few images today as I offer this acknowledgement, and I want to start by acknowledging the air, the land, the water, the plants, the animals, who Robin Wall Kimmerer calls the more than human beings, who are with us and sustaining us throughout the day today. Through my own journey to understand reconciliation and my role in it, I've come to understand how important land is to Indigenous ways of knowing. And I understand that we can't reconcile with each other without also reconciling with the land. And so I start my acknowledgements in this spirit. It's important that we understand the history of the land on which our communities are built. So in that vein, I acknowledge that the land that is now known as Chatham-Kent is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. These are three Anishinaabe nations who formed an alliance. And people of the Three Fires Confederacy live in many different municipalities and First Nation communities, but our neighbors in the unceded Bikejwanong territory are part of the Three Fires Confederacy, so Walpole Island First Nation, and you can see the reference to the Three Fires in their logo. I also want to acknowledge that we neighbor the Alenupawi-Lakawit, the Lenape, also called Delaware Nation because of the river that flows through their traditional territory. The Lenape were pushed out of their traditional homelands and settled here among other places in the late 1700s. Indigenous people have lived on Turtle Island, what we call North America, for time immemorial. Because of this, there may have been other nations who stewarded the land. So I just want to take a moment to express my gratitude to all of the peoples who came before me and stewarded the land over time. For people who are not on their traditional homelands, we're settled in this region because of the McKee Purchase Treaty, or Treaty 2 of 1790. And that written treaty document is available online. If you look at it, it is framed as an exchange of land for goods. But that doesn't really align with my understanding of Indigenous relationships with the land. Land is not something to own or give away. And earlier treaties put more emphasis on how we should be in relationship with each other and the land. And yet, at the beginning of every council meeting, we hear that as beneficiaries of the treaty, we have responsibilities. But what does that mean? If we want to understand these responsibilities, we need to listen to the oral histories of our treaty partners and look at some of the earlier agreements and understand the intent and meaning behind them. So the resource that you were given at the beginning of your term, and that's also available on the Living CK website, A Road to Understanding Indigenous Culture, references a few of these treaties. And I want to say a few words tonight about one of them, the Two-Row Wampum. And I'm sharing some teachings that I've learned in part from local urban Indigenous leaders like Faith Hale. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm sharing what I've learned, and I'm always happy for my knowledge to be expanded. The Two-Row Wampum, or Gaswenta, is an agreement originally made between the Haudenosaunee, then called the Iroquois, and Dutch settlers. It has two purple rows that represent separate vessels traveling in the River of Life. One is a ship, which represents settler or non-Indigenous communities, and the other is a canoe, which represents Indigenous communities. Each have their own language, cultures, beliefs, and laws. The pathways are parallel. They're equal and distinct. They don't intersect because we're not meant to interfere with one another or impose our ways of knowing or being on each other. The three white rows represent trust, friendship, and peace. These are the principles that are meant to guide our relationships as we live alongside one another, and these are part of our responsibilities to one another. This agreement was meant to last as long as the grass grows, as long as the sun rises, and as long as the water flow. It was also meant to be the basis or foundation on which all future agreements were made. So how is the Gaswenta, the Turo Wampum, relevant to us today in this room and in our work? And I certainly don't want to oversimplify treaty responsibilities or relationships, but there are a few things that I think are important to understand about these early treaties. And I'll reiterate my thanks to some of the urban Indigenous leaders for sharing some of these teachings. The first thing that I think is important to know is that treaties are not artifacts. They apply today. And this has been affirmed in our own courts and legislation in what we can call the ship system. Learning about and understanding treaties helps us create informed and respectful relationships with Indigenous nations and peoples, and it's an important part of reconciliation. The second thing is that treaties are not just about nation-to-nation relationships, although that is important too. They are also lived out through us in our interactions human to human, and that is a great opportunity for us all. So I'd like to extend an invitation that I've been giving to colleagues and partners as I've had opportunities to offer territory acknowledgements at events. And my invitation is to think about how we can live out the spirit of the Turo Wampum in our work as we navigate both the more mundane and the more challenging situations and conversations that are part of our work. How can we approach these and our relationships with one another from a place of trust, friendship, and peace? When we live and work together in this way, intentionally from a place of trust, friendship, and peace, we grow systems and communities that honor our roots and the spirit of this original agreement. Thank you, Miigwech and Ashik.
Thank you, Rebecca. Approval of a supplementary agenda. Mr. Mayor, we do not have one this evening. And rules for council chambers. The rules of decorum at a council meeting. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere that is inclusive, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disturbs, disrupts, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in removal from the premises. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. Mr. Mayor, I have not received any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening. Does council have any to declare? See none, we'll move on to deputations. Council, this evening you received two deputations that were just emailed to you from Mr. Jason Clark for item 17A and from Ross Newkirk on item 22D. This evening we have four deputations here. The first one is Hope Haven with regards to item 17A, Housing and Homelessness Progress Report. I'll remind all deputations that you have 5 minutes and the timing will be on the screen. The speaker for Hope Haven would like to come forward. On deck will be Clark Schultz for the Tecumseh Park Neighborhood Association.
Everybody can hear me? Okay. I am Lori Bailey, and I am the General Manager for Hope Haven. We were open as an overnight emergency shelter for 4 years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We opened through the commitment of volunteers who staffed our program exclusively, while generous community donations allowed us to renovate our building and serve nutritious meals to anyone who needed us. We had on average 9 people per night. Amidst the pandemic in 2020, we made the difficult decision to close our overnight program temporarily. Following the opening of the municipal shelter, we reevaluated our program, our clients, and the needs in the community. In response to the outcry of downtown businesses regarding visible homelessness in the city's core, throughout the day, we opened our day program. This provided a safe place for people to come in during the day to shower, do their laundry, have a warm meal, and receive access to the internet, telephone, emergency groceries. We work closely with the municipality's rapid rehousing program to connect people with available and appropriate services. In 2021, we had a total of 12,049 visits. In 2022, that number rose to 19,000. By the end of October this year, we have already surpassed that by almost 500. As temperatures get colder, I can very safely predict that we will reach nearly 25,000 visits this year. Our extreme weather overnight program has had 398 visits. This easily could have been lives lost to the elements in the absence of our warming and cooling centers. Through a partnership with the municipality, we are now able to pay our staff. They are not paid nearly what they deserve for the very hard work that they do, but we compensate them for their time. We are still blessed to have volunteers at many levels of the program, but we know that this work requires training and accountability that comes with compensation. We have had to increase our staffing numbers as the community that we are serving face escalating unmet needs. Safety is our priority, and to ensure that, there must be enough people on the floor. To say that we are at our capacity is a grave understatement. There is no way that we could have foreseen the 800% increase in people desperately in need of and utilizing our program over the last 6 years. We are only able to do this as augmentation of the municipal emergency shelter. In the absence of that, the visibility and the catastrophe that is our current homelessness picture will be completely overwhelming. When people come to Hope Haven, they develop relationships with each other and with the staff. We are able to gather information to help them if it's help that they're seeking. For people interested in housing, we can quickly connect them to the housing support team at the municipality. There is a lot of stigma around our program and the people that use it. There is concern that folks are coming from other communities to benefit from the apparent plethora of services available in Chatham-Kent. Through close relationships with other shelters and programs in other communities, I know that the same is said there, that people are arriving from other counties to receive their support. On average, we are seeing 80 people a day, with 3 to 4 being from other communities, less than 5%. Every member of our team can tell at least one story of someone that they grew up with, worked with, lived beside in Chatham-Kent that has come through the Haven doors. While it would sit a lot easier, I suppose, on our collective conscience if these were in fact people coming from out of town, the grim reality is these are your neighbors. People you went to school with, your friends' children, maybe your own children. This is our problem. Many organizations are out and about in our community trying to make a difference in the number of people without homes and providing comforts for them. In addition to our day program and emergency overnight program during extreme weather, we also provide vaccine clinics, hepatitis C screening and treatment clinics. We are a naloxone distribution and training center. We are trying desperately just to keep people alive. We know that when they are alive, there is hope for them and for our community. Approximately 30% of the people that come to Hope Haven do have housing. They come to access hot water, food, laundry services, internet, and community. We know that many rely on our services to maintain their housing, and in its absence, they too would be unsheltered, perhaps living in Tecumseh Park or a municipal parking lot. Until higher levels of government come to the plate and provide real support for the needs of this population, it must fall on local taxpayers to ensure that there is somewhere for every member of the community to go. Not because it's fair, but because if we don't, what will happen to them? And what will happen to this community that is their home, our community? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is from the Tecumseh Park Neighborhood Association, Clark Schultz, on the same report, item 17A, Housing and Homelessness Progress Report. On deck is Jason Herder for item 18E.
Thank you. The Tecumseh Park Neighborhood Association asked to be heard on the matter of the Municipal Housing Development Information Report, which will be received by Council tonight. The location of and proper resourcing for any emergency shelter in Chatham-Kent is an important piece of the puzzle when considering the overall state of housing in our community. Therefore, we believe that our concerns about the current Murray Street shelter should be addressed when reviewing this report. In 2022, at the 11th hour, residents of our neighborhood learned of the plan to relocate the emergency shelter to Murray Street. With time working against us, we nevertheless came together as a community to discuss our concerns with this plan. The result was a simple request made to Council in the spring of 2022. Delay the decision to relocate the emergency shelter to the Tecumseh Park neighborhood in order to allow for meaningful public consultation to take place. Unfortunately, the concerns of residents, as outlined in the many deputations submitted to Council at that time, were ignored or brushed aside in the municipality's haste to relocate the shelter. Moving forward, we were assured of the municipality's support and advised to communicate our ongoing concerns directly to law enforcement as well as to Council. Since that time, we have diligently done so, to little or no avail. Most recently, on October 26, 2023, the TPNA wrote to Council sharing numerous letters from residents who told their stories of how our once safe and beautiful neighborhood has changed dramatically since 2022. As reported by a number of media outlets in the past few weeks, residents now live with the disastrous consequences of the hasty decision to relocate the emergency shelter to the Tecumseh Park's neighborhood. This kind of news represents not just a blight on the Tecumseh Park neighborhood, but on our municipality as a whole. The TPNA is therefore requesting that the Chatham-Kent Municipal Council ensure that any future funding to assist the unhoused in Chatham-Kent be contingent on the following. The present emergency shelter on Murray Street will close on or before May 2025. Any emergency shelter or similar facility be relocated in a non-residential area. Prior public consultation must be conducted and a plan put in place by the CKESS to address the very real concerns and issues residents and business owners face when they live and work near an emergency shelter. This consultation must include regular, in-person meetings and clear problem-solving timelines. CKSS complete a clear, detailed plan, the operational information, realistic goals, and success factors, as well as budget and staffing costs. The plan must include complete data, be free of jargon, and include numbers that are specific to services and locations. The plan must be transparent. We are face to face with the homeless crisis in our neighborhood, and it is truly heartbreaking. The TPNA firmly believes that the unhoused have rights. Just as young people looking to build a life in our community have the right to affordable housing, and ordinary, law-abiding citizens have the right to live in a safe and secure neighborhood. All we ask is that you consider the rights of all stakeholders as you make ongoing decisions about affordable housing in Chatham-Kent and the location of any future shelter, any future emergency shelter. Respectfully, the Tecumseh Park Neighborhood Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Next deputation is from Jason Herder on item 18E, the motion of Councillor Wright regarding Chatham-Kent Special Olympics. On deck will be Henry Van Haren.
I just hit enter. We'll see how this goes. Thank you. I'm here to present on the 2024 Special Olympics Ontario School Championship Games, which are going to be hosted here in the municipality between the 10th of June and the 12th of June, 2024. The presentation today, I'm going to go over a quick background of how we came to get the games, event details, and then the ask. Background, Chatham-Kent was selected to be the host city for the Special Olympics School Championship Games in spring of 2023. This will mark the return of the Special Olympics Games to Chatham-Kent for the first time in 26 years. Chatham proper was the host city for the Special Olympics Summer Games in 1997. These games will bring to the municipality between 800 to 1,000 special need athletes, along with their families and coaches, to promote inclusion, acceptance, and dignity for those with intellectual disability through sport. The event details. We will welcome our out-of-town athletes from across the province of Ontario to Chatham-Kent on the 10th of June, 2024, as we host a welcome night for those out-of-town athletes. The games will begin on June 11th at multiple host locations within the municipality, at Richtown College, University of Guelph, as well as the Richtown High School, where there will be bocce ball and basketball, at Chatham-Kent Secondary School for track and field, as well as St. Clair College Thames Campus, as well as the Healthplex for soccer and floorball. In addition to the 5 sports that our Special Olympic athletes will participate in, each athlete will have access to the Healthy Athletes program. This will provide the opportunity for each of our special need athletes to have access to health services and programs that include getting their vision checked, BMI check, healthy eating habits, hearing check, and an overall health and fitness check. On the evening of the 11th of June, we'll bring the opening ceremonies and the running of the Hope of Flame into the John D. Bradley Center, as the municipalities will welcome our athletes to the city. The games will continue into the 12th of June, with the afternoon portion of the day kicking off the medal presentations to the winning athletes in their competitions. The games will close out with the closing ceremonies that will once again be hosted at the John D. Bradley Center. Our ask. Our team of volunteers have been working hard to fundraise for these games in 2024 with a budget of $400,000. This ensures that there's no cost to every athlete that participates in the games. This includes their meals, medals, lodging, and transportation that will be covered for every single participant that's coming to this games. To date, our team has raised half of that amount. We've secured multiple venues that are municipal assets that include Thames Campus Arena, Memorial Arena in case of a weather emergency, soccer fields at Thames Campus, the John D. Bradley Center, and Erickson Arena, again for a weather emergency if need be. Our ask is we've also requested the services of CK Transit to provide transportation for our athletes that will be required to travel between Richtown and Chatham for the purposes of competitions and for arriving and going back to their host hotels for, after the opening and closing ceremonies. We're looking to offset those costs of these municipal sites and assets wherever possible to divert the funds that we are raising to make the experience for the Special Olympics athletes coming to Chatham-Kent second to none. I thank you all for your time and the opportunity.
Thank you. And the last deputation is the Wallaceburg District Museum, Henry Van Haren, on item 22F, the motion of Councillor Carmen McGregor regarding the restoration of the Von Ayers Cultural Center and Jeannie Gordon Theatre.
Good evening, Mayor Caniff and council members. I am here to speak on to the 18B and 22F on the agenda, and also here tonight is Ken Wilson, a member of our board. The Von Ayers Cultural Center in Wallaceburg, consisting of the Wallaceburg District Museum, the Jean Gordon Hall, the Wallaceburg Sports Hall of Fame, the Alman Resource Center, and the Crawford Langstaff Parkette, are housed in the old Hydro building and property located at 505 King Street. The building and property is owned by the municipality of Chatham-Kent and is leased to the Wallaceburg and District Historical Society for a nominal fee. This facility is operated by a small staff of 3 and by a group of volunteers that work many hours to ensure that the artifacts, displays, and documents in their care are maintained, cataloged, and available for public viewing. The municipality of Chatham-Kent has provided funding through a core grant to help pay for staff and upkeep and have paid for utilities such as hydro, water, and gas for as long as any of our people can remember. The municipality has also covered most of the maintenance and repair costs and life cycle upgrades, while our staff and volunteers take care of minor repairs, upkeep, and updating our displays and exhibits, and making sure this facility is safe for our visitors. The Jean Gordon Hall for many years was the home of the Little Theater Group and once hosted a TV cooking show for Cable 6. In 2014, there was a fire safety inspection and report done, which determined that upgrades were required to the life safety systems of the entire building, and that the Jean Gordon stage and hall would need significant fire separation upgrades in order to continue to be used as a theater. The necessary upgrades to the emergency lighting, exit lighting, and fire alarm system were done to the entire building. The decision was made that it was not financially possible to carry out the fire separation work in the theater, and that the theater could no longer be used for theatrical performances. The Jean Gordon Hall could still be used for other events and purposes that did not involve props, backdrops, or theater-type activities. This was a significant blow to the theater group that made substantial use of this venue. Since that time, the museum still made use of the Jean Gordon Hall for events and fundraising activities, avoiding anything on stage that could be construed as a theatrical performance. Now, for several reasons, the Jean Gordon Hall use is being reviewed again. A meeting was arranged with Chatham-Kent Building Services representatives, as well as fire inspector and RAO Studios architectural firm, to discuss these issues and the lease agreement, which was due for renewal. Part of the discussion centered around the use of the Jean Gordon Hall, particularly the stage area and designation as a theater, though it could not be used as such. The theater classification brings with it stricter building and fire code restrictions, which affects occupancy levels, washroom fixture count, and exit requirements. It was also stated during this meeting that we would be responsible for the utility costs, maintenance and repairs, snow removal, and cleaning services, as it was part of the previous lease agreement. In actual practice, CK has taken care of these expenses in the past, despite what the lease agreement had stated. We have not been sent any invoices or notices until recently. To add these costs to our budget would definitely be financially unmanageable and would result in closure. We very much appreciate the financial assistance from the municipality over the life of this museum, and would like to see this assistance continue and be part of the new lease agreement wording, along with clarification on the use, classification, and occupancy levels of the Jean Gordon Hall. It should be noted that other local groups under the umbrella of the Wellsburg and District Council for the Arts, such as the Wellsburg Concert Band and the Wellsburg Little Theater, are all in need of a suitable, if not permanent, venue for practices and performances. The Jean Gordon Hall, if renovated, could provide this venue. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council members, for your time.
Mr. Mayor, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following items have been pulled out of the consent agenda. Item 15A, the Integris Annual General Meeting Report, for a presentation by Jim Hogan, President and CEO of Integris. Item 16A, the 2022 Audited Financial Statements, presentation by Matt Torrance, Director of Financial Services, and Brock Priddle, also pulled by Councillor Harrigan. Item 16C, August 2023 Budget Variance Forecast, pulled by Councillor Jubenville. Item 17A, the Housing and Homelessness Progress Report, pulled by Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Harrigan, Councillor Crew, and Councillor Story. Item 18D, the motion of Councillor Crew regarding future renovations of the Chatham Cultural Centre, pulled by Councillor Crew, Councillor Bondi, and Councillor Story. Item 20A, the appointment of the Integrity Commissioner, closed meeting investigator, pulled by Councillor Jubenville. Item 20B, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Strategy Update Number 7, pulled by Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Jubenville. Item 21A, the exploration of film, television, streaming industry sector in Chatham-Kent, pulled by Councillor Thompson, Councillor Story, Jubenville, and Doyle. Item 22A, Road Safety Action Plan, pulled by Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Story. 22B, Traffic Calming Policy, pulled by Councillor Sakachi. 22C, Sidewalk Network Completion Policy, pulled by Councillor Harrigan, Sakachi, and Doyle. 22E, Strategic Asset Management Policy Update. There's a presentation by staff with regards to the policy update. Therefore, remaining on the consent agenda are items 13A, B, C, items 14A and B, items 16B and D, item 18A, B, C, E, item 19A, and item 22F.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Wright, can I get you to move the consent agenda, please?
I'm happy to move that.
I'll second it, thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
yes,
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 15, Integris.
Integris Annual General Meeting Report, presentation by Jim Hogan, President and CEO of Integris, Inc.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members and fellow administration. My pleasure to be here to provide the 2022 results of Integris and our annual general meeting. We have 4 subsidiaries. Our main business is the Integris Power Lines, Inc. That's the majority of our business, and that's the distribution of electricity. And Integris Power Lines were regulated by the Ontario Energy Board. Therefore, we have many codes and guidelines and policies that are approved by the Ontario Energy Board. And the Ontario Energy Board on an annual basis ranks all the utilities into different efficiency cohorts. And we are in the first cohort, so in a group of utilities that are the most efficient in the province. Health and safety, as you can imagine, is a priority for our business. A lot of the work the gentlemen do and the staff, you know, high voltage, so it's very risky business. So we spend a lot of time on health and safety. We're part of the Industrial Health and Safety Association Certificate of Recognition Standards, so we've been involved in that for a while. And with our internal audit last year, we had a score of 98%. And then, of course, we do significant training with all of our staff. Very community-focused company. We donated over $400,000 last year. Some of the recipients were the Habitat for Humanity here in Chatham-Kent. Very active with United Way in all the communities. And then in St. Thomas, the CMHA Thames Valley Addiction and Mental Health Group. As far as our employees, we have about 120, 125 employees now. Still having a bit of turnover, a lot of retirements, and then real challenge recruiting and keeping young engineers. So they're very sought after. So it's a lot of work for us. We had 30 recruitments last year. Nice part is 6 of them were some internal transfers and promotions for staff. So good opportunities for our employees to be doing different things. We work closely with many of the post-secondary education institutions in the area. Spent a lot of time with the St. Clair College Lineman Program and very active with the different co-op programs. So it's been helpful and successful for us in attracting the staff. And as far as the customers, grew up by almost about 1,000 customers last year, 1.5%. And then we do an annual customer satisfaction survey, and we had 93% score. So we are, in our opinion, meeting the expectations of our customers. 5 or 6 more. The next one's a capital program, so, no. Voice customers, there we go. So we'll use that. Okay, sorry about that. So we do reinvest in our distribution system on an annual basis, and we're now up over $14 million. A lot of it is conversion projects, so upgrading, putting in new technology out there. You can see a list of the number of projects we did in Chatham-Kent last year. We're still investing quite a bit into smart grid, so getting new technology out in the distribution system, and over time that will continue to improve the reliability of our distribution system. All right, very good. So as far as Integris Services, Inc., that's where we have our data center, which is here in Chatham, and then we had the fiber business, which was in St. Thomas. Both those businesses were successful. However, in 2022, we decided to sell the fiber business. We had an opportunity to monetize that. It was a successful transaction, and we were able to provide an extra $300,000 in total dividend to our shareholders. And in our Integris transmission business, that's where we have the utility corridor. We were able to find another partner to have an easement on the corridor. So that provided a significant financial return for Integris. And in 2023, you'll see an additional $3 million in a dividend to all of our shareholders. Now, I just want to point out that it's an easement that this new partner has. Integris still owns the land, and there will be, this new partner will respect the current easements and encumbrance on the land. So the municipality of Chatham-Kent has an easement for a trail on a portion. This new partner will have to respect what Chatham-Kent's plans are with the trails. And then our Integris renewable business, that's where we have the 15% investment in North Kent Wind, still a very successful investment. And to date, we've received about $900,000 more in dividends from that project from the original plan. So then the overall financial results, as I said, very successful for Integris last year with the two unique transactions, selling of the fiber business and the partner of the utility corridor. And as I mentioned, North Kent Wind is still very successful. We are continuing to invest in operating maintenance and the capital program. Very important for us to provide the best service we can. Customers are expecting a lot from us, and we're doing our best. We are borrowing every year, but we are below the level of borrowing that the Ontario Energy Board has in our rates. So we're still have a strong balance sheet and able to continue to grow the business. And again, we've met the dividend commitments of our shareholders. So there's three items that we're looking for approval from for the annual general meeting. First off is the approval of the audited financial statements. Approval of the board members. The board members are listed there. The first 6 board members are appointed by Chatham-Kent. The other ones are appointed by the other various shareholders, but we need approval from all 3 shareholders for the list of board members. And then looking for approval of the appointment of MNP to be the auditors once again for Integris this year. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Pincinel, can I get you to move the recommendations, please?
I'll move the recommendations.
I'd be happy to second that.
Any questions? Jim, as always, you explained it real well. I don't see any questions, so we'll put it to vote. Thanks, Jim.
Councillor Finn?
All votes are in.
And motion passes 18-0.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Item 16, Finance, Budget, Information Technology, and Transformation.
16A, 2022 audited financial statements. We have a presentation, and looks like Brock Prindle will come up and speak.
Good evening. My name's Brock Priddle. I'm the manager of corporate accounting, and tonight I'll be providing a brief presentation on our 2022 audited financial statements. 2022 is the first year of our 5-year audit contract with MNP. Chatham-Kent received an unqualified audit opinion, meaning that MNP has concluded that our financial statements present fairly the results of Chatham-Kent's operations and its financial position according to generally accepted accounting principles. During tonight's presentation, I'll provide a brief overview and items of interest on our financial statements, including debt, reserves, accrual versus cash accounting, and our financial position. Chatham-Kent's consolidated financial statements consist of 5 fully consolidated boards and commissions, including Library, Police, Public Utilities Commission, Public Health, Drainage, and 1 government business entity, which is Integris, Inc. In accordance with public sector accounting standards, the consolidated financial statements must include the following 4 statements. The statement of financial position, also known as the balance sheet, includes a listing of the municipality's assets, liabilities, and accumulated surplus. The statement of operations and accumulated surplus, commonly referred to as the income statement, is comprised of Chatham-Kent's revenues and expenses. The statement of changes in net financial assets include capital asset transactions, as well as changes in other financial assets. Finally, there's the statement of cash flows, which is simply a record of our sources and uses of cash. We've highlighted the following items of interest on our financial statements. Item 1, in 2022, we purchased $40 million of fixed income GICs and $34.4 million of principally guaranteed equity-backed notes. This resulted in an increase of $74.4 million to our investments. Item 2 is an $11.2 million increase in provincial funding. This is primarily attributable to $4.1 million in Wheatley gas leak emergency funding, a $1 million Hydro One grant, and $5.5 million of increased funding to social and family services. Lastly, our debt has decreased by $9.4 million, which I'll discuss over the next few slides. The municipality's long-term debt totals $38.5 million. Of this, $23.1 million is related to the Public Utilities Commission, and these debt payments are funded through water and sewer rates. Of the remaining $15.4 million, $7.8 million is covered by senior government funding, which leaves $7.6 million to be funded by the general tax base. This equates roughly to $73 of tax-funded debt per resident of Chatham-Kent. As shown in this graph, the municipality continues to pay down our debt, reducing our debt load from $161 million in 2010 to $38 million in 2022. If the municipality does not incur any new debt, this will be further reduced to $29 million by the end of 2023. The Public Utilities Commission is represented in blue, and it's decreased from $89 million in 2010 to $23 million in 2022. The municipal general tax base and other senior government funded debts is represented in green and has decreased from $72 million in 2010 to $15 million in 2022. This graph depicts the trend in our reserve balances. It is reflective of our net contributions to reserves, which are contributions into reserves less the use of reserves. In 2022, the reserves continued to grow, increasing our reserve to debt ratio to 7.2 to 1 in 2022, which means for every $1 of debt, we have $7.20 in reserves. This is up from a ratio of 0.4 to 1 in 2010. In 2022, our reserves increased by $37 million, and our operating expenses increased by $38 million. As a result, our total reserves as a percentage of expenses increased from 68% in 2021 to 70% in 2022. This financial indicator shows us how much money is set aside to meet our future needs. The increase in reserves can be used by council to assist in meeting their strategic objectives and provide the ability to fund major capital projects while incurring little to no further debt. For this financial indicator, anything above 20% is considered low risk, and the average of all Southern Region single-tier municipalities was 58.5% as of 2021. As per public sector accounting standards, Chatham-Kent needs to present our financial statements on an accrual basis. This slide displays the reconciliation from our accrual surplus to our cash deficit. As an example, on an accrual basis, amortization of capital assets is recorded as an expense, whereas on a cash basis, amortization is not a cash outlay. The cash outlay is at the time that the asset is purchased. Chatham-Kent's annual budget is prepared on a cash basis, as we're concerned with the amount of funds we receive and how we intend to spend those funds in the year. Our financial statements, conversely, are prepared on an accrual basis to ensure that we are in compliance with the aforementioned standards. The municipality's 2022 cash deficit of $2.5 million is primarily attributable to the Wheatley gas leak emergency. Net financial assets is measured as financial assets less total liabilities. A positive net financial asset number indicates the amount of resources available for future needs. A negative number, or net debt, would indicate the amount of future revenue that is required to pay for past spending decisions. Our $274 million net asset position indicates that our assets exceed our liabilities, and hence our past transactions are not negatively impacting our future revenues. This increased by $27 million from 2021. This graph highlights Chatham-Kent's net financial position. Chatham-Kent was in a net financial debt position prior to 2014, and as you can see, it has improved to a strong net financial asset position, increasing by $342 million since 2010. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. First, I'd just like to move the recommendation that council receive and approve the audited financial statements, and then I just have some comments.
Councillor McGrail, can I get you to second this, please?
Yes, I'll second that.
Back to you, Councillor Harrigan.
Great, thank you. And just very quickly, Brock, thank you so much for the presentation. I know it's not easy to take something like audited financial statements and succinctly present it to a group of lay people as counselors, and I appreciate that. And I also just wanted to call attention to council that during the audit committee meeting that was recently had, where we had a bit of a preview of these, it was shared with us that this was a challenging year because of some of the software support that ended for our finance team, and so they had to really work through that, and that required a lot of extra work and hands on deck for that team. So Brock and Matt, I just wanted to very much thank your team for that, and also reiterate the praises that were sang about you by our audit team this year. They said that our CK staff were excellent to work with, and that's always really great to hear from the audit committee members. So thank you very much for that.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18 to, oops, sorry. I was looking at the old one.
You're way ahead of us.
I am. All right, all votes are in now, and it passes 18 to 0.
You're psychic.
Just keep following my. 16C, August 2023 Budget Variance Forecast.
Councillor Jubenville and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
I so move.
Seconded.
Councillor Jubenville, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question regarding the Bloomfield Industrial Park, stated as an unfunded capital project from 2005. My question is, how did that come to be? And because I wasn't here back then, but just if you could give us an update on that. And is there any other unfunded projects similar to that? And how do we protect ourselves so that something like this doesn't happen again? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back in 2005, at approximately a cost of $15 million, council approved building a funding plan, or approved building the Bloomfield Business Park with a funding plan of funding that expense through the sale of the land and also taxes generated from that land. So as of right now, there's about $6.5 million left outstanding. Since about 2016, we have been funding part of that unfunded debt with the surplus generated at the end of the year, about $500,000 annually. So that's how we've gotten to where we're at. As relates to, is there any other unfunded debt? No, there is not. And for council, I would say if a project came up that council looked at proceeding with, administration would recommend to always have a funding plan through taxes or some other means. But again, it would be at the will of council at that point.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 17, Health and Human Services.
17A, Housing and Homelessness Progress Report, and Kim Crew, Program Manager of Homeless Prevention, has a quick update for council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. An update on the report that was presented to you. Administration has been investigating viable alternatives to our current emergency shelter to present to council for consideration. As indicated in the report, one of the alternatives is a multi-use emergency shelter with congregate living space that would contain sleeping quarters with multiple stairs per room, in addition to a congregate living, kitchen, and bathroom area. We are investigating two options within this new build. One that is solely an emergency shelter hub, and a second that utilizes an additional floor to serve as second stage transitional housing with the intent to provide life skills training and supports to live successfully. It is anticipated that this style would be similar in operation to our current system, including the number of stayers we can support, the cost of operations, and the required staffing levels. We have toured a local new build, which was a bunkhouse style, to see how it's constructed, and we're given an estimate from the company of approximately $2.5 million for capital costs, which is lower than the original figure quoted in the report. We do believe that this option would be a suitable replacement to our current model. The second alternative we have been investigating is a grouping of cabins, approximately 100 square feet in size each, with a common building that would provide bathrooms, kitchen, training spaces, laundry, and an office or meeting space. The cabins are constructed from shipping containers, and the quantity is customizable to our community's needs. We were able to tour the municipal cabin program in Waterloo that was recently opened, as well as the factory there where these cabins are constructed. After seeing firsthand the cabins in Waterloo, we are confident that this could be an alternate way of addressing homelessness in our community. The Waterloo Cabin project included 50 cabins in addition to the common building. The capital cost for this was $35,000 per cabin, and this included the cost to build the common building, so a total in of $1.75 million. The cabins are an economical and scalable approach that maintains flexibility in the future, as they can be built to be removed from the property and repurposed should we no longer need them. There is also opportunity within a cabin project to build a larger, fully functional cabin at $50,000 each as a second stage to affordable housing. Attaching supports like life skills training and participation requirements would allow us to address the need for emergency housing while also providing independence and autonomy that is required to move into long-term housing. The stage we are at now is we're finalizing some estimated capital and operational costs while looking at current municipally owned land to determine feasible options for these potential programs to present to council. It's important to recognize that in 2023, our needs are different compared to what they were in 2020. Hence our motivation to explore different options in the traditional shelter. We believe that the Housing First model is a model that can end homelessness, but it's unrealistic for any community to say that we can provide housing first within our current housing market. We know that 90% of our stayers at Victoria Park Place rely on social assistance income, meaning a single person in receipt of social assistance either has $390 per month or $556 per month, depending on their program, to rely on for shelter costs. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation has determined that the average market rent for Chatham-Kent for 2023 is $1,283 for a one-bedroom unit. Due to this reality and the simple fact that we would need hundreds of deeply affordable units to solve homelessness in Chatham-Kent, we feel that it is our role to tailor our housing and emergency solutions to the residents in our community. And we are targeting to be back in front of you within 1 to 2 months with options for both of these recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sakachi.
Happy to put it on the floor, Mayor Caniff, and I do have a motion that I'd like to bring forward.
Sorry, this is an information report, so I need to move through.
Sorry, happy to put it on the floor, the information report, and I do have a motion when it comes to.
Go ahead,
to move
Councillor
forward.
Sakachi.
Do I need a seconder to put it on the floor, Mayor Caniff? No?
If you could read it first. then
Okay,
we'll-
sure. No, I just thought to put the report on the
Yep.
floor. I didn't know if you needed.
No,
it.
don't need
Nope,
the report
perfect,
on the floor,
perfect.
it's just for information.
Sure.
So-
That administration return to council with a recommendation to build a new building and/or build multiple smaller buildings, cabin/tiny homes, to replace the current emergency housing program at Victoria Park Place. The location of this program should meet the following requirements: not adjacent to elementary schools, splash pads and wading pools, or licensed childcare centers, not in parks or directly park adjacent, not within residential neighborhood interiors. Administration should include the recommended model, including why the recommended model is chosen over the alternative. Both estimated capital and operating costs are to be included. Administration must ensure that the recommendations factor in the current forecasted timelines of the project to ensure that it is operational by May 2025 or earlier. Administration to provide a recommendation no later than January 15th, 2024. Administration to review and report back on the following considerations: the creation of a community safety and well-being task force that can be formed to help collaborate and utilize different community and municipal partners with experience to take on local initiatives to improve the well-being of community members that are impacted by the growing mental health, addictions, poverty, and homelessness crisis in the community. Consider developing a group with neighboring communities to help create best practices and successful strategy options and potential synergies for cost savings. Administration consider a new committee of council to strategize to help deal with homelessness and the effects that homelessness has on neighboring businesses and neighborhoods, including terms of reference and policies. Develop municipal tools and a mission statement to help communicate and educate the community, focusing on increased awareness, increased knowledge, and engage in active media engagement to shift attitudes and further educate the community on challenges that our vulnerable are facing in the community, with the goal to enhance the knowledge and bring to light the complexity of the issues that Chatham-Kent and neighborhood communities are facing. Continue to advocate the province for the need of policy and funding changes, as municipalities are not equipped to fund the increased demand and challenges of homelessness, mental health, and addiction, as a municipal funding stream cannot continue to support the increased costs of shelters and homelessness. And continue to formally inquire to the province and ministry, including our local MPP, for reasons in writing why neighboring communities receive significant increases to the homelessness prevention funding, with Chatham-Kent only receiving a single-digit increase, and have it included for public information on a future date as an upcoming information package item. If I could get a seconder for that, Mayor Caniff, I'll try to quickly go through my motion.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Sure, and I did have what I think will be a friendly amendment to a portion of the motion as well, if you want me to.
What is that? Sorry. Well, what is your friendly amendment?
Yeah, so it's just with respect to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. So there currently is a Community Safety and Wellbeing Steering Committee. So I was just looking to change that to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Steering Committee, provide an update to council regarding ongoing work and community collaborations.
Are you good with that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Caniff, and I was going to touch on that during my initial comments as well.
All right, so Councillor Scotchy, go ahead.
Yeah, so the whole goal of the motion is to recognize, I do greatly appreciate, Josh, the countless hours that we've had a chance to communicate about this. The motion that was made to bring this report back and the details that has come back in this report. The whole concept of the motion is recognizing that we're never going to have a perfect location for a shelter or anything that services are less vulnerable. So the goal of this whole motion at the beginning is to address the fact that we are going to task administration do the absolute best that they can to find a location that suits the needs of the people who are experiencing the most challenging times of their life, recognizing that when we place and facilitate these types of environments, that it does bring significant challenges to the neighborhood. So the goal would be to also look at all the options possible, and when it comes to council, there's always a lot of pressures from the existing communities. And I think it's very important for us as council to know that we've already went through all the steps possible to try to limit the impacts on the neighborhoods while we're still catering to the people who significantly need our help. And just a quick question to you in the first components of the motion, question to Mr. Myers. I know there was some questions with other councilors in regards to if this was limiting the aspects of your search for a property to make sure that it wasn't putting it so constringent that you would have a difficult time finding a location. And I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with the request in the initial part of the motion.
Yes, and thank you for the question. With respect to the I think guidelines on it, I think it's only fair that administration that we're using that as our guidelines. And should we get into a situation where we've reviewed every municipal piece of land that meets this and we don't have one that is suitable, then it's on administration to come back, explain those reasons with the parcel that we do think is feasible as the best worst case. But given our work that we've done so far, these are in line with the guidelines that we've been using, and I'm hopeful that we'll continue to make progress, which we can then report back to council.
Thank you, Mr. Myers, and through you, your worship, to Mr. Myers as well. The last term of council, there was a lot of work done by administration in regards to looking at existing properties and existing bricks and mortar builds, and also, current municipal actual buildings that we own. In all the work that your team has done, which is extraordinary, do you feel that it would be beneficial to be looking at an existing property, or do you feel that we've undertaken, existing building, or do you feel that we've did significant undertaking to try to already find if there is an existing building in place to address the concerns?
My colleague, Polly Smith, Director of Employment and Social Services, may have more to add on this, but what I can share is we've worked with 3 realtors during the pandemic looking at multiple buildings. We reviewed the assets that the municipality had with respect to current buildings and feasibility, and at that time it was frankly shared that none of them fit that need. They would take extensive renovations and changes to the business model of that building. I don't have any reason to believe that that has changed, which is why we've been largely focused on current property to basically build. As shared earlier, though, at the same time, looking at different models, because as we are seeing, things will continue to get worse unless these systems change, and we frankly don't have any sign that these systems are changing.
Thank you. And just to go through a couple more of the components are in here quickly, and so I can respect everybody's time. A lot of the things that are mentioned in regards to the creation of community safety and well-being task force, considering developing in groups of neighboring communities, and administration considering a committee of council. These are all things, as we discussed, and Josh and myself had a very detailed conversation, that understanding that some of these things are already potentially in the works or have been discussed. But what I think is very beneficial is that we bring to light all the work that we are doing and bring to light, these types of things so the community can recognize what we're doing and help get more engaged. When we're dealing with homelessness, mental health, and addiction, a lot of times the focus is on the people that are suffering these very significant challenges. But sometimes what happens is that, the consequences of the neighbors who are experiencing these significant challenges feel that they also want to have some sort of dialogue or, community awareness. And I think it's important that we do our best to bring this to light, to show how the community can get engaged, and show that the neighbors that are experiencing these challenges, how they can get engaged. Because doing nothing, if it comes, May 2025 and we do nothing, can you summarize, you think, the catastrophic challenges that our community would then face if we just decided to close the shelter with no remedial plans in place, Mr. Myers?
So to summarize what that would mean is a difficult task, but it's something that we often revisit, because one of the difficulties we have right now is how do we show the negative impact that's not occurring because of the services that are in place? We will share that the services that we have are not enough. When we speak with our partners at the Ontario Health Team, CMHA, the Health Alliance, the police, the services that are needed for a growing population do not exist in this community. And those are a lot of the conversations we're having with our partners on how do we bridge that gap. If we were to look at right now, I believe, correct me, but 42 people stayed at VPP last night. So they'd have nowhere to go. We do diversion with them to ensure that this is a last resort for them. If we looked over the summertime and nearly full every night, those individuals would have nowhere to go to access those services. 295 people went through shelter this year, January till October. 15 of them were over the age of 65. 18 were unaccompanied youth. Without that service, they would have nowhere to go. On any given night, there's 60 plus people in Chatham-Kent that don't have anywhere to go, and they are sleeping in encampments across the municipality. We continue to find it is that much harder for us to engage with them to offer appropriate services than it is for those who are seeking those services and have them available at through a program like Victoria Park Place. So in summary, without that program, we will continue to see more people have no services available. They will frankly get sicker, and I believe as a society we will see a larger impact. We are seeing it now because we don't have enough services.
Thank you. And just in closing, maybe this is just comment is more directed for a response from Mr. Quinton. This morning I had a quick conversation with Mr. Brown in regards to the budget components of the shelter and homelessness funding. Over the course of around the last 4 years, the municipality has taken around almost $10 million from reserves. Mr. Quinton, what do you feel that if there isn't a change into provincial funding and policy change, would you consider that our reserve to fund this would be in good shape? Do you think that we're starting to get into a position with that particular reserves that we're utilizing that we are starting to see, a situation where it could become then a tax ask moving forward?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So in the upcoming budget, you will see the proposed funding for Victoria Park Place up until May of 2025. And that, with those drawdowns, basically draws down the reserves that was coming from to zero. So, council has options of looking at other reserves, or ultimately, if this is an ongoing permanent cost for the next decades, we should look at tax funding at some point in time.
Thank you. And just to go over for council, just so they're aware, so 2020, if it wasn't reserves, it would have been a 1.41, this is estimated 1% increase. 2021, 2.17, 2022, 1.73, and 2023, a 0.76. And these are estimated numbers that I've got from Mr. Brown. This just shows the extreme challenges that the provincial funding stream is putting on the municipalities. Although we might be best equipped to offer the services, we are not in a position to continue to fund this moving forward. And I think it's really important to have an on-the-record conversation with our local MPP and the ministry of why the funding, increase to Chatham was so small, and how municipalities like ourselves that are already seeing significant challenges like every other municipality can continue to fund such a large ask when the wellness of homelessness should be a provincial and federal issue funded, delivered by municipal partners. And I do appreciate all the time that you've given me on this subject, Your Worship.
I've got Councillor Crew, Harrigan, and Story as speakers, but Michael Dubin would like to have a couple clarifying questions in.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So just, I know it's a bit unusual, but from a staff perspective, obviously a lot of us involved, it's an important issue. So I'm seeking some clarification from the mover. In terms of right at the beginning, it says the location of this program should meet the following requirements. I'm just asking for a clarification there because some of the requirements are subjective in nature. So for instance, not in parks or directly park adjacent. Can I assume that the word should, obviously we don't make decisions without council directing us anyway, but we may end up coming back with something that perhaps there's an interpretation that it's not in the neighborhood interior, or it's sports field adjacent, but far enough away that there can be a barrier. I just want to make sure that there's some flexibility for us, and that we should interpret this and bring whatever forward, and council will then determine if it fits the should or must language. So.
Thank you, Mr. Dubin, and that's a great clarification point. The word should, in speaking to, I did have a good conversation with Mr. Mars, but their direction would be very open-ended, recognizing the fact that we're just going to do our best to check off as many boxes as possible. So when the hard decision comes back to council and we're in a room full of people whose neighbors it's going to impact it, we can say that we did our best to try to limit the impact to as many of the following things as possible, recognizing it's going to be impossible to eliminate them all, but knowing that we at least went through an exercise to try to meet the following requirements, because I'm going to go back to Councillor Solomon back in the day about shoehorning things in there. We're doing the best job possible not to try to shoehorn these into like an old school where it's an interior of a neighborhood, recognizing you guys are the experts and you're going to do your best to do that, but knowing that it's not going to be possible maybe to be 100% specific.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Crew, then Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just have a couple questions. Kim or Josh, hi Kim. How many people in our community are living rough, not in the shelter, and the shelter's pretty much full every night. So how many people are living rough, or maybe you have to turn them away? I know that there's encampments and all of these things that we have a by name list. So if you can give us that number, or your best estimate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, our current by names list is 187 people right now. We had 42 of those folks at VPP in shelter last night. And according to our by names list, we have 71 folks that have identified they are living rough or living outdoors.
How many?
71.
71.
Not a self-declaration.
What is that increase from last year, if you know?
I don't know, but I can bring that back to you.
These are kind of not fair questions. I should, but I just.
That's okay.
I'm not the numbers person, so that's quite a lot of people. 71 people. If you go, we've all seen it. The increase in the visible people living outside. You know, when you go by Hope Haven, the parking lot, the municipal parking lot, and there's people sitting there in blankets on the cold days, and I'm whining because my feet are cold in my boots at home, or sitting here. And we have people in our community that are living in a parking lot. We have to do better, and I think that we just had a presentation, and I paid attention, and I didn't go to sleep, Michael, in the audit. The audit, but it looks like financially we're in pretty good shape. So I think that, and I'm just looking at all of us, I'm not asking staff a question for that, but when budget comes back, we need to look at making sure that we do better with this, because this isn't going away. This is increasing. From the province, this is where their checks come from, if I'm correct. So $390 to $560 a month for rent, that's what they're allowed if they're on assistance?
Correct. In receipt of Ontario Works, a single person receives $390 per month for shelter purposes. And if they're in receipt of ODSP, then a single person is receiving $556 a month for shelter.
So they're living pretty good on ODSP. So rent, if anybody gets those sheets, or the list of housing that's available, usually it's like $1,400, $1,500 a month. What would their whole check be if they got a single person got a full check?
So a full check for a single person in receipt of Ontario Works is $733 a month.
So they're still not getting an apartment. So you're trying to help people get housing that doesn't exist in our community.
And that's what I wanted to add to this. We are now facing a point, and we have been for the last 6+ months, where our housing specialist team, if you're on Ontario Works, because that has not changed, we used to be able to get you a single bedroom apartment. Then it was a bachelor apartment. Then it was a room rental. We can't find room rentals at this rate at this point. So without an influx of PHBs or other supplements, frankly, even sharing a room rental with someone else, if you could convince the landlord to do that, that's still a tall order with respect to what their income is.
Okay. Yeah, it's setting everybody up to fail. There's just not enough. So though that money is, that money that they get, that amount is laid out by the provincial government. So that leads me to my next point, Mr. Mayor, is after this passes, hopefully, I have another motion that I want to bring forward. I think that the province needs to step up more. It's not just a Chatham-Kent or a community issue everywhere. This is across the province, and our staff and everyone, elected officials, hopefully, are fighting for us, but we need to step up, and they need to do better as well, and we all can do better. I think that's all I have to say right now because I'm beginning to ramble, but if you would come back to me after Councillor Sakachi's motion hopefully passes, that would be great.
I will come back to you. Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Keniff. I will try to be quick because Councillor Sakachi asked and commented on a lot of the things that I had to say. I just wanted to pull a question just from some of the deputations that we received. So first I wanted to thank the TPNA group for speaking. I really hope that Councillor Sakachi's motion here addresses some of the concerns about the kind of quick last minute decisions. We've got some time now, so let's really use it to have some meaningful discussion. And then through the mayor, we sometimes get, and there was even reference to the comments about people who are being brought into Chatham-Kent from outside of county. Can you please speak to a bit more to the who around who it is that we're giving service to, and maybe potentially help us to give some speaking points to what I understand would be like debunking that myth, right? Like these are not people being bussed into Chatham-Kent. These are our community members here in Chatham-Kent that are seeking services. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Keniff. In the vast majority, yes, that is correct. I was just in Toronto last week speaking with colleagues, and every community seems to have the same myth. If every homeless person in Chatham-Kent was being bussed here from other communities, then other communities wouldn't have the same homeless crisis that they're facing. At VPP or with our housing specialist teams or through CK Cares, we have access to provincial databases where we can help with respect to different benefits or income payments. We can see that history of where someone's from. So from the moment we are in contact, we are having those questions because frankly, we continue to see you have a greater chance of success if you have a support network around you. And if you're brand new to this community, you don't know where the support services are, it's going to be even more difficult for you to be successful here. Now, that's not to say that of the 200 people we know to be homeless, there's not maybe 10% of people who travel between communities. Just like us, people can travel anywhere. But frankly, we have no data to support that people are coming here for our services. Our services are not accessible to them. When I speak with our colleagues at the police or at Hope Haven or Rock Missions, we do check in because maybe this does change. Maybe there was a busload. We have not seen that, and we continue to hear the same messaging with other colleagues.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mayor Keniff.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Josh and Kim for that information. Really appreciate it. Definitely second everything that's already been said today, and thanks to Lori and Clark for your very meaningful words. Couple questions have been answered already with this excellent discussion, but just a few more points of clarification. So you, probably to Josh, you've indicated that there is a wait list right now, and it didn't go down in the summer months like it has in the past, or Polly, sorry, whoever makes sense. Now we're going into winter now. Do you anticipate those numbers are going to go up heading into the colder weather? Will that wait list get even longer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we do think that those numbers are going to go up over the winter as people come in from encampments. That has typically been what has happened, and every time the weather gets colder, we see more people. So that's been very concerning to the team. And we've been planning for a little while over that. And thank goodness for our community partners, because we don't have room at Victoria Park. So we are relying on Hope Haven primarily to help with winter warming for people that we cannot find a place for.
So what happens when Hope Haven fills up? Victoria Park Place is full on a cold winter night. Hope Haven is full on a cold winter night. Then what?
That is also very much a concern, and we'll be looking at, facilities that we can rent or borrow to expand those services. So we are, we're quite concerned.
I can see why. In terms of the $2 million operating costs, when you have to, in that event, Victoria Park Place is full, Hope Haven is full, we're seeking other options. Is that included in the $2 million operating costs, or is that in addition to what we're already seeing as our operating costs?
So thank you. That would be, typically that is paid out of homeless prevention dollars. But again, if we're looking at additional costs, we would try to find it within budget. If we cannot find it within budget, we would have to come back to council.
It's not necessarily budgeted for, but we try and, you're very creative, I know, with trying to figure out which pots of money to pull from, but at a certain point, those pots of money are not going to be sufficient. They're not already, in the sounds of it. Can you share a little bit more about, like, how, without any confidentiality issues, but a high-level general demographics of the people who are living in homelessness right now in CK? And I know the numbers tonight, we're probably focused on Chatham, but when you talk about the 71 that Councillor Crew mentioned, is that Chatham or is that Chatham-Kent?
Thank you. That would be Chatham-Kent.
Okay.
And Manager Kim Crew has a lot of demographic information on the people that we're seeing through the program.
Okay. Could you maybe general demographics of who's in homelessness and who's using Victoria Park Place, and then has that changed over the last 2 or 3 years since we've opened Victoria Park Place?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our current demographics on the total by names list for Chatham-Kent, and that is for all of Chatham-Kent, just not Chatham proper. 90% of our by names list is made up of adults, meaning the ages are from 25 to 64. 2% of our by names list is made up of seniors, and 8% is made up of youth. To consider who's staying currently at Victoria Park Place, 92% are in that adult range, 5% youth, and 3% seniors. As far as gender, both on the by names list and those that are staying at VPP, we have 70 or 68% that are male, and the 28 to 31% female, and 2% have identified as other. We also currently have 4 families that are considered homeless in Chatham-Kent, and that includes 6 children that are being currently supported in motels. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I'd just like to add, we're currently looking at our data with respect to the level of need, because one of the things that we have been seeing in the last year, and frankly, each year, the level of need seems to be increasing. And what I mean by that, the barriers to successfully remain housed are increasing, and the services and supports either don't exist or they're not increasing. So each year we used to be able to say that there was maybe 10% of individuals that we don't have programming for. That number is increasing each year because those individuals remain homeless while others become more ill due to the effects of extreme poverty.
Thank you. Those numbers are deeply upsetting. This gets me every time. So what are our touch points right now with people experiencing homelessness? I know it's when there are folks, we obviously have encampments along the river, along the creek, in the park. are we going, or any of our community partners going to them? How do we engage with them and encourage them if we have the space to come to Victoria Park Place?
So again, thank you to our community partners. Through Hope Haven and Rock Missions, they continue to provide outreach services. Hope Haven has their warming center day programming where people can come and they become quite familiar with. And with partnership with our housing specialist team and staff, we're able to connect them with those resources when they are ready to accept them. Rock Missions, through a pilot partnership that we have right now, are going out several times a week through either volunteers or paid staff to connect with individuals currently living in encampments along the Thames River, in the bush by the Black Bridge, throughout Chatham-Kent. They also go to Walsburg and Blenheim. So if we hear of an encampment, we're first connecting with them to go and make that connection. And their focus very much is building on that relationship so that there's a trust there that they will then engage in services.
So it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It's a longer process to perhaps convince them to come inside and access those services at the shelter.
It very much varies. It's an individual approach. Sometimes people are ready right away. Other times, yes, it may take quite some time.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more questions. In terms of budget, maybe this is for Gord, but in the multi-year budget, we have funded Victoria Park Place until May of 2025. But we haven't included anything beyond that. So what happens then? What happens in May of 2025 if we don't have the budget planned for in our multi-year budget situation?
Thanks, Mayor Caniff. As I said before, we do have funding from reserves till May of 2025. Once directions received from council, which won't be happening prior to the multi-year budget, but we do have annual updates in the multi-year budget. And so whether council decides that comes from the tax base or from other reserves, because like I mentioned before, the reserve that Polly had used for this over the last few years will be empty by 2025. It will be a council decision, but you know, likely if you build permanent something permanent, you'll likely have a permanent operating costs that will have to be brought through in the budget updates, or at least for the 2028 to 2031 multi-year budget.
Okay, thank you. And last question. I see in your recent request for proposals that closed in September, we did not receive any expressions of interest to take over this service. So do you foresee that changing before May of 2025? There's really no one waiting in the wings to take on these responsibilities?
No, I don't see that changing. I think it's important to note that this work continues to grow in complexity. That's not to say that there aren't many groups in this community doing excellent work, but to take on a program that's operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you do need a number of in-kind services that a large organization has, and I'm not sure of many of the large organizations that currently exist in the community, what their bandwidth is. All services are being stretched at this time.
Thank you. I'd just like to reinforce the previous comments. Thank you for all that information. I agree that the provincial and federal responsibility should be partners with us at the table. And right now it seems like we're the only ones at the table. We're sitting here by ourselves. The people in this room and the staff, our community partners are seeing it every day. I know we might get capital funding in a couple years from the province. We don't have the luxury of waiting years. We're facing this right now. Some who might be more cynical might assume that's deliberate. I sure hope it's not. This is likely one of the top, in my personal opinion, one or two most critical, pervasive, and relentless issues we're going to face this term. And we have to deal with it, and likely in council terms to come. So the health of and vitality of our downtown and small businesses depends on it. Our downtown residents deserve it, and our vulnerable friends and neighbors who, because as Ms. Bailey said, these are our friends and neighbors. Their lives depend on it. So thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Sakachi, for the motion.
I'll go to Councillor B. McGregor, then over to Councillor Scotchy for final remarks before we put it to vote.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I wanted to echo some of the thanks to the Tecumseh Park Neighborhood Association for their ongoing work. It's easy to engage at the outset of some of these projects and kind of fall away, but I know that they've been in constant contact and working on the issue. And also wanted to recognize the folks from Hope Haven who have been working for a long time in this space and probably were some of the first to see this sort of growing storm that's been happening in the community. I think it's important to recognize the community organizations that have been working hard in the area and our own staff. Sometimes we don't always recognize them as first responders, which they in many ways are when we're thinking about this issue in the community. I think it's important to recognize that they're very much doing it without the resources to meet the challenge. So I think it's fair to say, and we've said it before, that the province has been pretty absent on this file. So we had a fall economic statement recently. Didn't really mention any new supports or any movement on housing or affordability in communities, and certainly no more supports for vulnerable individuals. And I'm pleased to hear that Councillor Crew is going to bring a motion, I believe, related to assistance rates, because we know that we can do all this really hard work, but when people are legislated into poverty, we're working against some pretty stacked odds, and we're not going to make much headway despite all the good work that's going on. I did want to point out a couple of things in the report or have some questions. There's a lot to digest there, and it's really important information. And I think there's a few challenges coming, and I wanted to maybe highlight that we have 60 fewer short-term rental options, and maybe if you could mention what happened with those short-term rentals and the type of impact that is having with finding people accommodation.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So in the report, yes, it references CK Extended Stay as well as the Travelers Inn. They both operated largely with short-term rental options for low-income individuals. They've closed. We have no word if they plan to reopen or if their business model is changing. When I discussed earlier how our shift on where we're working, where the goal is to get somebody rehoused, sometimes it did have to shift to a short-term rental because that was all available. And if our goal was to get people out of the shelter, we would sometimes look at those options. Largely, though, for those two people, we're finding those on their own. And so not having that, that's, again, less resources that we have in the community for people who can't afford anything else.
Yeah, and certainly that's quite a challenge with some of those missing options. And I know over the next few years we also have agreements coming up with our private nonprofit partners who are providing housing. So can you maybe comment on the impact of those agreements and what they're currently providing in the community and what could be at risk depending on how those agreements change?
Yes, absolutely. Approximately 592 rent-geared to income units are currently operated by our private nonprofit partners in the community. That means if you're on Ontario Works, to Ms. Crew's point on $376 for your shelter, that individual is actually only paying $85. They can afford to put food in the fridge. We frankly need 3 times the amount of what we provide as a municipality and what our private nonprofit partners provide. In the budget packages, and as will be discussed more in the new year, we are reaching the end of mortgage agreements, which means that for each of our partners, they have some decisions to make on whether they want to continue partnering with the municipality, which means pulling from our centralized wait list, the wait list that we talk about in housing services for people seeking that type of housing. We've done some rough calculations, and Ray's Harper's report speaks much to the work we're trying to do to build more housing to start changing the trend. But we have to keep in mind, if we lose those units, I believe the rough cost was $260 million to replace them, and that's not including the soft land development charges that go along with that. This is also why, though, it's having a different conversation at our table with respect to when we look at different things like a cabin program that may be more economical. It might not be what we were originally looking for in the community, but we have to accept what the financial reality is. $340,000 right now with current construction costs to build a 1-bedroom unit, that adds up really quickly when we need thousands of them.
Yeah, thank you and appreciate the responses. I'm supportive of the motion. I think it's important that we are well ahead of this decision and that we'll see something coming back sooner rather than later. And certainly appreciate all the work that's been going on behind the scenes. And I think it's really helpful that we get an opportunity to know where we're at in the process, and that we can work with community members to really address what's a growing challenge in the community, and hope that everyone can get on board with supporting some of the solutions that we'll have to be investigating. Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, final thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor Ken. I think everything has pretty much been said, but I just wanted to take one more opportunity to thank your team, but especially yourself, Mr. Myers. I know that you took calls for me on Saturday as well as after hours, and you've been extremely helpful. And this is, in this very important matter, and I just wanted to express my thanks to you once again publicly, and how much you've assisted me through the process. So thank you very much.
With that, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Councillor Crew, I'll go over to you for another motion.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I move that council prepare a letter addressed to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, as well as local MPPs, to strongly recommend that accommodation rates of social assistance payments increase to the local average market rent for recipients of Ontario Works Assistance and the Ontario Disability Support Program, and that a copy of this letter be sent to AMO, Roma, and all councils in Ontario. I so move.
Councillor Harrigan, will you second that?
Very happy to, Mayor Caniff.
Anything you want to add to that, Councillor Crew?
Well, we need to send a very strongly worded letter to the province to help address this systemic problem. This isn't going to be the answer, but it is going to help people who are living in legislated poverty to at least have a chance. They don't have a chance right now. You can't rent anything, and you wonder why they're living in a parking lot. It's not the only answer, but we need to make sure that we send this letter, get it to all the other councillors, and hopefully we can put some pressure on the province. This isn't just a Chatham-Kent problem. It's not created by us, it's not created by other communities, and it's not created by the province alone, but we need to put some pressure on them. You need to start helping with this issue, and we need the help now. I want to thank Kim and Josh as well. Very, very good presentation, and I really appreciate everything that they've done with this.
Michael Dubin would like to clarify something just on your motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, again, just a clarification. If they were to agree to it and increase it, then I'm assuming your intention is that they would keep it consistent with. So in other words, we don't want to go back and ask every time. So is it okay if in the letter we not just ask that the payments increase to the actual average market rate, but it stays consistent with it as that rate goes likely up as opposed to down?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor, and I didn't have a chance to ask my neighboring partner here, but I'm wondering if we could also add ALPHA in there, the Association of Local Public Health Agencies. We do have a current resolution in the process that is working with AMO to end homelessness, that we're partnering with them through the Health Task Board that sits at AMO. So if we could, if it's okay with you, if we could, and it's a lower A, lower L, capital PH, lower A, is, sorry, the acronym for ALPHA. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bondi.
Thanks, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, this is a good idea. I think it's going to fall on deaf ears, though, because you're asking for them to triple what they're giving. But, what the heck, it's worth a try. But what I think might want to clean it up a little bit, just from what I listened to, we're asking for an increase to the local average market rent. But I heard there's a number of different varieties of rent. Room, bachelor, one bedroom. So I'm just saying that could be a question that could come up. What local average rent, I just think we should clean that up a bit to say what we're looking for. It's just, and I wouldn't have thought of that if I had not heard that there's, rooming house, room, bachelor, one bedroom, etc. So just a housekeeping thing.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll specify what it is, and we would ask that it be increased right across the board for all different types of rental.
Okay, with that, we'll put this to vote.
Counselor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
We'll go to item 18, Chief Administrative Office.
18D, motion of Counselor Crew regarding future renovations of the Chatham Cultural Center.
Councillor Crew?
Oh, 1 second. Oh, you moved too quick. All right, whereas the arts and culture and performing arts are vital within our communities of Chatham-Kent and falls within this council's term priorities, be it resolved that staff prepare a report to present to council for future renovations of the Chatham Cultural Center, including Thames Art Gallery and Kiwanis Theatre seating and other capital enhancements. This report, in consultation with related community and user groups, and that this report include estimated costs and funding sources, and this report be presented to council by March 2024.
Councillor Bondi, can I get you to second that, please?
Sure, so seconded.
Okay, Councillor Crew, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just put this together quickly because last meeting, when we made the motion to move the Civic Center eventually downtown, and that the museum would be part of that process, I just thought that this was an opportunity to make sure that all of the user groups at the cultural center are heard, and that we take this opportunity to enhance and develop the cultural center in a way that is still, and even probably better, for our user groups in the community. And that's all. It wasn't meant to be this big motion. It's like go do some consultation, bring back a report. I don't do consultation, so I didn't call anybody to consult with them. But I'm just looking for enhancements and a report back in the spring.
Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So as someone who actually worked as the manager of culture and special events for quite a few years here, I am always, anytime arts and culture is brought up around the Horseshoe, I am thrilled. I just had just a few concerns. I mean, I know how important these venues are to our community and for tourism and economic development and overall community benefit. I just want to make sure that the usual process is followed for something like this, because I know what tends to happen, especially with arts and culture and heritage groups that I have found, is that, you know, this type of consultation comes up. A lot, these volunteers and the advisory committee groups, et cetera, and staff spend a lot of time in good faith working on these projects and sharing their feedback. And then since there's no longer term plan to implement them or resource them, when all is said and done, nothing happens. And that plan gathers dust on the shelf, and we're no further ahead, except now we've contributed, I think, a little bit to the disillusionment of these groups, that we're going through these routines where we haven't necessarily thought about the longer term opportunities for them, the long-term success and viability. So while I fully support resourcing these venues, and I do, I just have a couple of questions, I guess, to the mover. I'm just wondering why the museum was not included, because that, if I understand last week's motion correctly, we're still reviewing two different options, correct? We haven't actually decided the museum is moving yet, so I just want to make sure, as a backup, that if in any result of the investigation of this work being done for the old Sears building, that if the museum does not move for any reason, that their needs would still be considered if they do remain at the cultural center. I would just hate for them to lose out in terms of wording of the motion. So would you be open to a friendly amendment to include the museum, just to ensure that their needs are included, in case anything does change with the future of that facility?
Yeah, and because, sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I just had a request from staff that, since they weren't aware of this coming, that to please consult with them and the Thames Art Gallery and Chatham-Kent Museum Advisory Committee, since they weren't aware this was coming. They'd appreciate being consulted first, and that way maybe that'll save some effort and avoid duplication moving forward. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thanks, Mayor Canada. With all due respect, Councillor Story. So are we going to be looking into the museum, like improvements at its current location and at the potential new locations? Is that what that says? Because if it does, I think that's, we're going down two roads at the same time here. Like, what are we going to ask staff to, look for potential improvements at the current location and at the, what seems to be a new location? Just seems like it's a lot of work. Like, frankly, I think we could leave the museum out of this one for now. And, this is a good start, and hopefully it doesn't collect dust, like you say, which I've seen happen over the years many, many times. But this is better than not, right? Like, we could not do this, and then we would be nowhere. I'm just a little concerned about the museum getting looked into twice, right? So.
Well, how I read into this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Crew, is we're looking at saying, what can we do with the cultural center as a whole? And if the museum moves over, what can we do with that space? Does it become storage for museum? Does it become another part of the art gallery? What are those? Well, we want to know that. If it does move, if it doesn't, for some reason, certainly we look at that. I see the gist of this as making sure that all of the different things we put off for years and years at the cultural center are going to be taken care of, like the seating. The seating was going on forever and ever. Let's look at that, get it done. If there's anything else that needs to get done, let's bring that up to speed along with what the cultural assets we're putting in the downtown with the new library and the new museum. That's how I read it. Councillor Crew, do you read anything else?
No, if, we can get the report back with looking at both options. It's not, I don't think it's going to be that in-depth with the museum, but, what can we do if the museum stays there, and options as a whole if and when it moves.
Okay, any other questions?
Consult everybody.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, I think it's helpful too. I know we all received it not too long ago, but the email from the chair of the museum board that outlines some of their ongoing needs. So I think that's the type of information that we're looking for in this report, and I think it's itemized pretty well through that email. So I would just expect that that's the type of thing that's going to come back saying, this is the amount of storage space we need, these are the deficiencies we have, and there's obviously going to be different ways to meet those needs. So I don't think that's a particularly onerous portion of moving through this, and I think is fine information to have all in one area when we're going through this process. That's not going to take just one decision point; it'll be multiple. So,
and seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in, and motion passes 18-0.
Item 20, corporate services.
20A, appointment of the Integrity Commissioner, closed meeting investigator.
Councillor Juvenville and Councillor Thompson, can I get you what's on the floor, please?
I so move.
And I will second.
Councillor Juvenville, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I only pulled this so we can vote on this separately, and it didn't pass through consent. While I'm sure the SC Consulting is a worthy candidate, as the municipal team has concluded through their own investigations, my concern is with the office of the Integrity Commissioner in itself. I read the Municipal Act, and it does state we are authorized but not compelled to hire an Integrity Commissioner. It appears we could also share an Integrity Commissioner with neighboring municipalities if needed. Unless I'm misunderstanding the Municipal Act, I feel sharing an Integrity Commissioner would save taxpayers an abundance of money, or revising our Code of Conduct to reflect using an Integrity Commissioner only when criminal matters or human rights violations are involved. I believe the Office of the Integrity Commissioner is flawed, and I do realize this is a provincial initiative. But where in a democratic process in Canada does one singular person have the arbitrary power to be a judge, juror, and prosecutor? Again, with all due respect towards the successful candidate, I can't support the recommendation due to the fact that I don't support the Office of the Integrity Commissioner as it presently stands. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor B. McGregor?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just looking for a little bit of clarity in how we bill the Integrity Commissioner. I think we reviewed this before, but it would be my understanding that it's billed through service, so whether we shared them with someone else or whether, you know, it may in fact be an Integrity Commissioner that is working for several municipalities based on the nature of the office. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, that's certainly my understanding. I've been involved with both, whether it's a shared integrity commissioner or whether it's standalone, and ultimately they charge you for their time put into the file. So the cost would be the same. Admittedly, if they do shared training, perhaps, but that's a small part of what they do, and that tends to happen usually just in the at most once a year, usually at the beginning of a council term. But even then, to be able to accommodate it. Plus, you have to have somebody who's willing to share with you. So if there's no neighboring municipality that's interested in sharing, then you can't avail yourself of that option.
Thank you, and I'm glad to see that we're appointing someone, and I know that it can be a really helpful resource when we're looking at advice on conflicts of interest and a whole other host of issues that we face as councillors and as the role changes. So looking forward to supporting that recommendation.
Councillor Juvenile, just to clarify that you want both voted on together or separately? I was just trying to figure out.
I just wanted it pulled so it didn't pass in consent. That was my main reasoning. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-1. 20B, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Justice Strategy Update Number 7.
As this is an information report, we just have questions. We don't need a mover and a seconder. So Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Juvenile had questions. So Councillor Harrigan, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Mayor Caniff. And just before I have questions about the report, Rebecca, I wanted to thank you for the very thoughtful and educated land acknowledgement that you gave us today. I really appreciate it when they're personalized, and I appreciate it when I learn something myself through the land acknowledgement, so thank you for that. Admittedly, I pulled this because I haven't been keeping up on all of the updates that you've been provided during my medical absence. And so I was just wondering if you could share with us what you feel like some of the highlights have been kind of throughout the past year, just really like one or two key points for you or for the municipality when it comes to our DEIJ initiatives. And then in follow-up to that, I'm wondering if you're working with other institutions or community groups so that maybe all of Chatham-Kent can improve our knowledge base around DEIJ initiatives together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you for the questions, Councillor Harrigan. A couple of highlights. I'll try and stick to two. There's a lot of things that have happened, but we have, of course, developed our first ever municipal diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice strategy, which is a great accomplishment for our organization. And we're seeing the start of it being implemented, and there's a few things there that are happening. Is our colleagues across the organization are starting to integrate diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice into their work. And of course, there have been colleagues who have already been doing that, and there are colleagues who are starting to do that as well. And so we're seeing things like criteria added in our Together CK grants that looks at whether the efforts will promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in our community. We're looking at ways that we can create more inclusive spaces in our municipal buildings. We're looking at embedding DEIJ in our core competencies and our job evaluation processes as well. We're starting to roll out education in our organization so that our leaders have a chance to really understand what it looks like in terms of promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in our organization. And we are also building relationships. So one of the highlights for me that maybe isn't always captured in our reports is the ability to build relationships and share with each other and with equity deserving communities, both in terms of building understanding of the experiences that people are having that are not so positive, but also sharing and celebrating in joy. And I think that is so important in terms of relationship building, that we have both, and that's what will sustain our work moving forward. To answer the second question about information sharing, most mainstream organizations are also doing work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and we work closely with the other organizations that are doing this work, so I'm in close contact with the other leads. I'm also on a number of committees locally having to do with promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We collaborate on messaging and initiatives to make sure that we're in line. We work closely with organizations that represent equity-deserving communities, so we're in regular communication with them, both myself and the community attraction and promotion team, to amplify their work. And we are constantly sharing updates about what's happening both in the organization and in the community on our website. So folks can look at our website at chatham-kent.ca/DEIJ as well to get updates about what's happening.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I know it's not always easy work, but it's certainly very important work for both our organization and our community, so thank you very much.
Councillor Juvenville?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report, Rebecca. In light of the future budgetary deliberations that we're coming up to, this is more of a financial aspect to the DEIJ strategy. I'm wondering, how is the DEIJ driving any financial efficiencies in the municipality? I know when we spoke before, you said you're a data-driven person, so I'm wondering if you do have any data that that you can provide to us, that it's a tax savings to taxpayers at all. I respect fostering relationships with community organizations and members and supporting municipal staff. It's good, but I also am concerned if it does become a tax burden for taxpayers. So I just want to balance it out, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you for the question. So right now we are funded through the Ontario Works Corporate Initiatives Reserve, so there isn't currently a tax implication for the work, but we will be going to budget to put forward some recommendations to support the work ongoing. And I want to say a few things generally about the business case for the work to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And we know through the data that is available that organizations that are inclusive and build a sense of belonging are better able to attract and retain talent. And that means that there's less turnover, higher employee engagement, and more productive employees. And that certainly leads to cost savings associated with staff turnover and absenteeism. When we look at the data in the private sector, people would say that organizations that invest in promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice are more profitable. In the public sector, that really shows up in efficiencies, like you mentioned. So when we better reflect the communities that we serve, we're better able to meet the needs of our communities. We're more creative in our problem solving. And of course, indirectly, when we can better meet our community's needs, we can attract and retain people and businesses as well to our community. And finally, I think that the work helps us ensure that we're meeting our responsibilities when it comes to human rights legislation. So that is going to prevent what can be costly litigation if what we're doing is found to not be meeting the human rights legislation that has been set out for us.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 21, Development Services. And I'll call up Councillor McGrail to fill in for me as the motion that I put out is up, and she can take the floor for me.
Just a note for both of you while you're changing seats, when it's time to vote, you'll have to vote on your own home base rather than at the other person's.
Perfect, thank you. We'll continue here. Item number 21, the exploration of the film, television, streaming industry sector in Chatham-Kent. So I will start with someone to put the motion forward. Mayor Caniff?
I will move that.
Perfect. And a seconder, Councillor Thompson?
I would move it, but I do have a couple of amendments I would like to make.
Okay, let's hear the amendments.
They're pretty minor. The first one is there's a change from no less than 1 year to strictly just 1 year. And then the additional point that a progress report returned to council prior to his second year of funding being approved.
Mayor Caniff?
That is a friendly amendment.
Okay, I'll start with Mayor Caniff, if you have some remarks.
Certainly, yes. It's, in the report, it's a very detailed report and talks a lot about the benefits of it, but I want to highlight a couple that this is a $3 billion a year industry in Canada. And right now, there's a lot of it's focused on a few markets. And those markets are being pretty saturated. So in everything we've looked at, there's a lot of interest in Chatham-Kent to do filming. So right now, as we speak, there's one going on that has $1 million budget. They employ nearly 50 people between actors and people working on it. They'll be over there for over a month and putting out a product that will be rolling out next year and hopefully in movie theaters. But it's one of those examples. We've had one other film here. We're going to have a few others. But it's a great opportunity to diversify our economy. And you know, as we move forward, it's one of those things that when we look at it, as far as overall what's going on in Chatham-Kent, it's something exciting to know that films are going there. And I'll just touch briefly on, it creates jobs. And the whole idea of that is that we're going to create an economy of people that can live here, and they won't necessarily work on the same movie for 12 months, but they'll work on this one for 2 months. And so we have a bunch of people, and there's a lot of people from Chatham-Kent that work in this industry that have reached out and said, wonderful, we'd love to move back and be part of it. So we can start developing that aspect of things. The spending, in the report it mentions 30% of what's the budget is spent locally. So we're talking $1 million budget, so $300,000 to house those 45 people. There's people from all over North America as far as actors, from California, from BC, and there's a lot of local people as well. And tourism, cultural exchange expression, developing skills. That's another thing we found is there's a lot of people from Chatham-Kent that are graduating programs. There are a few of them are on the set right now learning firsthand with what's going on there. And they've reached out and said, the people that are doing this have moved here and they want to do more movies because they recognize how significant it is here as far as being able to film here, and we have 10 different downtowns that we can go to and all of that, but there's so much here. So I want to put this forward as a 1-year pilot to invest in it, to create a pretty amazing industry right here in Chatham-Kent.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the amendments were friendly, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I think it's certainly an interesting idea, and I think that there's a creative community within the municipality. The reason I added the amendment, especially number 4 there, is I think we do need a report back to put some numbers to it. I appreciate there is filming going on right now, and I know that's probably news to a lot of people. Myself kind of included. So getting some information back before we decide how we're going to fund this long term, I think is important. I don't mind funding it from a development reserve right now as a 1-year pilot, but I think going forward, if we are going to fund this long term, it can't come from a reserve. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Story.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the fact that we have a movie being shot in Chatham-Kent right now is really exciting, and I'm happy to hear that they chose Chatham-Kent to do that, and the support I know that the municipal staff across the board have provided them. I just have a couple of questions, because I do have, I wonder if sometimes we decide on the final outcome, and then we have to figure out the steps along the way. So I'm not against this in principle, but I do worry about the precedent we're setting on how we make these decisions and how we fund them long-term. So just wondering, I guess from Stuart, thank you for the report. Appreciate the effort you put in to explain the pros and cons of this. How did this proposal come to be? Did the film community, which I know is growing, it's probably not huge yet in Chatham, but did they approach the municipality to ask for this position to be created?
Thank you much for the question. Through the chair, you know, the film industry's been going on for a while. I gave some thought earlier on today. I remember when I first started here 17 years ago, someone come into town, and it was probably not something you've seen on Netflix. But I think it's been going on and off for a while. And I believe the mayor's office and the special initiatives group have received some calls and had some discussions with some groups, and become a little bit more real. And I think that's when the Flick office was that was adopted or when it was created, and ECDev has been getting a little bit more involved in it, and hence the reason as to why we're here today and saying that. And I do appreciate your comment about there's a lot of things we don't know, and I think that's what this is all about. Instead of the fire aim ready, let's put the time into it, understand it, and go from there.
Do you think, one movie every couple of years is an industry yet? Would you categorize it as that?
Through the chair, that I don't know. Is it Spielberg, or is Tupperville going to be the next Dawson Creek, or Dresden next Little House on the Prairie? I don't know.
That would be pretty cool.
And I guess, hence the reason we're here, but I can tell you, and this is being all honest and we're respectful of everybody involved. I can tell you that what I don't know is that if all of a sudden we need to shoot at 3 o'clock in the morning on King Street in downtown Chatham, and there's going to be pyrotechnics, I have no clue what Chief Case is going to charge me. I have no clue how much Mr. Soldo is going to want for Public Works to be there to put stop signs up or remove this, and I have no clue whether or not Public Health is going to need to be there, and I have no clue what a permit value is, what is out there inside of the market, what is acceptable. These are things we don't know, and in economic development, when you come through our door, if you say to me that I'd like to start up a business, my first comment is going to be, do you have a business plan? If you say no, well, what's the potential revenue? Well, I don't know. I heard it's a lot. What's the cost? Well, I don't know. Who are you going to sell it to? I don't know. I think that's where we're at right now. We'd like to bring this back and have those questions answered so we can come back to council and find out whether or not this is something that is a great opportunity for Chatham-Kent, but we'll be able to do it based on fact, and we'll be able to do it based on information we'll be able to gather while we're here.
Thank you for that. From a municipal perspective then, if it's more of a question of permitting and making sure different departments are aware of what we need and when, and making sure that the fire department's aware of what our needs are, would that not potentially fall under existing special events that we already have? Like an existing role, we have a position that's responsible for special events in the municipal organization, do we not? Would it not? I'm just wondering if that would fall under their bailiwick.
I think our CEO would like to comment on that.
Yeah, through you, Acting Chair. I think that's part of it. I think the point is we need to learn from other municipalities, and we don't have anyone who has the knowledge now, and we don't have anyone who has, who's just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. So part of what we need to do is answer your question. Is one film going to make it an industry? So we have other municipalities that we have to talk to. We have to find out from them how they got to where they are, because some have been very successful. We need to determine what are some of these things that if we do go down that road, that we need to be prepared to do. Is it a special events thing? Is it a special group that does it? I think that's the point, is we don't know what we don't know. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. I mean, all of you probably know Hamilton has done really well in the film industry. It took them years to get there. And part of what we need to find out is how did they get there? What did they learn? If Chatham-Kent does become an attractive location for that, how can we curtail the decade or so that it took them, or more, that it took them to get to that point? I can tell you Muskoka is a big place for filming, but I don't think they made it an industry there. And so the question is, well, can we do something different? Are we more like a Hamilton down the road, or are we just the type of place where, to your point, we do a couple films at a time? So I think that's exactly what we need to do here, or is what this motion says, is that we're exploring it and exploring on a number of different angles. So if council does decide to go down that road, that we know what we're getting into, and is it worth it, and do we have the tools to be able to deliver?
Thank you. Just one final question. I appreciate that information. Is there any possibility that a role like this would be tendered out to a contractor, for example? We could have someone do this research and come back with recommendations. Does it need to be in addition to our staffing complement? I just look at everything else. And the context of that I mention this in is I'm not against this at all in the context of growing another cultural industry in our community. The context I'm looking at it is my concern about everything else we're hearing about our financial pressures. This seems like a nice to do right now, to be perfectly honest, and I just struggle with additional costs that we might be able to look at doing a little differently, for tendering it out to a consultant to do the same kind of work that might be able to focus on a few of those strategic points to get this started, and then they can build the case for another, like to continue that or not. Because, I mean, no disrespect to either community, we're not a Hamilton in the greater Horseshoe area that has, I think, a different community dynamic, size, access to skills and population that we don't have in Chatham-Kent. So I'm just wondering if other options were considered for this research. Thank you.
I don't think any other options were considered. I think the approach was to use staff. But I will say this, that often what happens is when we put these types of things out to the market, we don't always get people submitting applications as an employee. Those people who look at these, sometimes we'll get people saying, look, we'd be willing to do it, but on behalf of my firm or on behalf of this organization. So I think we approached it as a staff person, but we can always post it in such a way that we can attract different people, not just necessarily a full-time staff person. And when I say full-time, by the way, it's full-time temporary. So once council commits to this, pursuant to the way the motion has been amended, if in fact after the report comes to you, which has to be within the year, and you choose not to go ahead with it, then whoever's doing the work, whether it's on contract, whether it's a consultant, whether it's a staff person, then that contract ends. So I don't know if Ms. Hoffman wants to speak to, I know we use the word staff in a lot of these, but it can be a contract, it can be with a contractor. I don't know if maybe Ms. Hoffman can add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. So, yeah, certainly there are many ways that we can staff an opportunity like this, whether that is an independent contract, it could be someone that we purchase service from for a defined period of time, have someone on a contract, or as Mr. Dubin outlined, it could also be someone that we bring on as our staff. We might even have someone within our own realm who we might second to a role for a period of time and who could go back to a home position subject to their skill set. So there are a variety of options that help us maintain some flexibility.
I guess I appreciate that. I guess that's not written in this motion, but I guess how you're describing as a temporary full-time contract position is what the motion says. So anyway, I don't want to belabor it. I appreciate that information.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think that's actually usually there more so that the financial component is understood, because this way we know that that's the amount of money that we can spend. Whether we end up signing a contract with someone, sometimes it's actually in our benefit to contract that out as opposed to, because we have the ability not to pay benefits. There's different things that we can do. So I think it's more about the ceiling in terms of how much money we pay for the position. But I know on a number of occasions we've had people who've applied for jobs and said, well, I'm not really interested in being an employee, but I think I can provide the service under these terms. Would you consider me? And I think the answer is we always would, as long as it was within the financial sort of ceiling that we've set out. So.
Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a neat idea, but I'm just struggling, even though I know it's coming out of the reserve, I'm struggling with the financial implications, knowing the economic climate of Chatham-Kent and our residents, and the fact that some families can't put groceries on their table, and then we invest in this, and then if we invest in it, we get so far, are we going to pull back the reins on it? That's my only concern. I know it's something neat, but I always look at things, is it a want or a need? So I don't think I'll support it, but it is a neat idea, and we'll see where it ends.
Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Acting Chair. Thanks for the report, Stuart. Some of my questions have already been answered. So just a question for the outside incurred expenses. It says potential damage repairs to privately owned properties and roadways, other expenditures required to be procured from outside vendors. So are we paying these then? Like, so if a film industry comes in here, if they're doing a film and they wreck somebody's privately owned property, does that mean we are paying that damage, or are we going to be getting that money back from them? Or am I just reading that wrong?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great pickup. That was actually come out of a conversation we had with the Windsor folks, who told us that they had on occasion where someone skipped town afterwards, and all of a sudden they were kind of left holding some repairs and responsibility, which they did. So they said, make sure you add a little bit in there. I'm hoping that as part of this due diligence and the upfront work, Mr. Taylor is going to work with us and make sure that we have an ironclad contract with whoever's coming in Chatham-Kent using municipal property or using our services, and that we have some sort of a retainer or an insurance policy. These are all things that we don't know. Again, that right there was a comment from our Windsor film folks, and I guess it's happened a couple times.
Yeah, I would say from somewhat a little bit personal experience, I know somebody that happened to where they kind of wrecked the yard a bit when they were there filming for a little while, and it didn't go well, and they didn't pay their bills. So I appreciate that. And then I would say thanks to Trevor for your friendly amendment. Had he not amended that to make it come back to us before year 2 funding, I probably would have voted no on this one, for the fact that this is coming from reserves, still taxes, but it's not going to increase our tax rate. I'm okay to give this a try for a year. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bondi, you're up next.
Thank you, Acting Mayor McGrail, I guess. Just a guess. Yeah, I'm kind of with Councillor Juvenville on this one. In that, I think it's a great idea, and I know it's possible. I have a friend in Port Hope, and they have films in Port Hope being filmed. Quite often, this guy's rented his house out. It's kind of a good gig. What I have a little bit of a question with is the wage for this person of $80,000, $10,000 for business travel, labor burden, which is benefits, I guess, of $28,000, car allowance of $5,000. This is a very good job, and I've got my resume right over here. But sounds like fun. I'm just wondering, like, could we not find like a Ryerson grad, like, university grad, Keene, that would not require like $80,000? Like, that is one heck of a salary for this. I think it's a good idea, but I guess we can't amend that right now, or we won't. But I just find the salary is really high. Like, if you could reduce it, and $10,000 for travel, like, I guess you got to go to Hollywood, right? But I don't know. I just have a big problem with the salary. I think, I almost would think we could do this in-house. Like, it doesn't seem like it's that complicated. Like, if, we could do it without, it's just the hiring the extra staff is the thing that bugs me. For, an $80,000 wage to go and try and drum up, some filmmakers just seems pretty expensive. Cool job, but expensive. So, anyway, that's where I am. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A while ago, me and the mayor was out in Thamesville. They were doing a shoot there on the First World War, all dressed in period. The actors come from the States and the whole over Ontario. We were in the trenches. It was quite an experience. They walked us all through it. If any councillor gets a chance to go to a set, they should go. But this group is doing it on their own. They really had no guideline from Chatham-Kent here. but they were again shooting a few weeks ago. But this part of this film is going to be televised here. It's a documentary, and we'll be able to watch a part of Chatham-Kent on the TV here. But they got the trenches set up and the barbed wire and everything. It's really a good set to see. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I just wanted to make the comment that I appreciate that as a council, we feel like there are budget asks kind of pulling us in all different directions, and we're also running a corporation here. And I see this as the comparable in the private sector when the corporation's investing on business development or creative new markets, thinking about ways they can expand. And I just wanted to say that one of the things that I really appreciate about our mover, Mayor Caniff, is his commitment to just this positive outcome and his belief of what our community can be, and this is being applied to the film industry. So I think this is super refreshing. I think that we are going to have lots of difficult discussions about where our tax dollars go, but perhaps this is an investment that gets us some really good diversified economic outcomes. And then we start to see CK on television a little more often, which makes people think, oh, I'm going to check out Chatham-Kent, and then see some of the great openings we have at places like Integris or the municipality or the hospital or schools. So, so certainly there's a potential for a snowball effect here. So, I just wanted to make that comment and also thank our mayor for always being so optimistic in his belief in our community in CK.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I just have a quick question. How much money is in that reserve right now?
I'm going to defer to my colleague, Mr. Quinton, about that particular reserve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the financial implications section, it was reported that there was just under 2.7 million in that reserve.
Thank you. And my other question is, what other uses would that reserve fund? Like, what does it currently fund? Like, what would it?
Thank you for the question. It basically is often what is used to fund council desires to do things outside the budget process. So often, things come through the year. I can remember quite a few reports that have come that have touched this reserve. So we call it a strategic development reserve for a purpose. It hopefully does bring something back. Like Councillor Harrigan was just mentioning. Like, is this a strategic move? Support your strategic plan. Those types of things. You should, but it is appropriate reserved. If council wants to go ahead with it on a trial basis for 1 year, this is the appropriate reserve to draw it from.
Thank you, Gord. And I guess my only other question would be, can you give, like, on the fly an example of something that we've used this reserve for that has given us, that snowball, wonderful economic boom effect?
Sorry, I'm having trouble thinking of anything, but I can look back at the last few years of what money was drawn from that and send council.
Yeah, and I guess my reason for asking that is kind of a twofold thing. One is, we have this reserve, are we utilizing it? And if not, maybe this is a wonderful opportunity for us to utilize it. Secondly, if we do have this reserve that we're putting money into and we're using it and it's not giving us anything, then maybe we need to relook at the strategy that we have this reserve for. I think that in any time of going through difficult things, like we are going to have difficult decisions, when we have an opportunity with a reserve like this to do different things that could have a really positive outcome, maybe this is the chance that we take, right? And this is the thing that's going to bring something really wonderful. And I echo Melissa in thanking Mayor Caniff for bringing something like this forward as an opportunity to look at. I mean, it has almost $2 million, you said, in the reserve, and this is an $80,000 ask. I mean, if it if it could bring back any sort of positive, I think that it's definitely worth looking into. And if not, it's an 80,000 loss from reserve that we probably are putting money back into yearly anyways. So I think that it's one of those things where it's a gamble, but sometimes it's a good thing to roll that dice.
Thank you. We'll have Councillor Sakachi, and then we'll turn it over to Mayor Canna for final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McFadden, just a quick question for you. How long have you been in your current role with the municipality?
To you, Madam Chair, I believe I'm in my 17th year.
Would you say the last few years have been substantially improved over the last in course of new businesses coming to town, different types of businesses and different ways we can maybe expand our abilities into different markets from a job perspective as well as an investment perspective?
It's been a lot of change in 17 years through you, Madam Chair. I think the last few years have been different, you know, and maybe if I could offer this, and maybe this is where you're going, but we had a site selector in town a year and a half, 2 years ago. Company was from Europe, and the comment from the site selector is, "What have you invested in lately?" And I'm going like, "What do you mean?" He said, "What's the municipality invested in?" I said, "Well, we've done this, we've done that, we've done this." And I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, if you're not investing in yourself, why should I recommend a company invest in you?" So I think these things that we're trying to do to make our community more culturally significant, or take advantage of what we have inside of our 2,500 square kilometers, and things we try to do to beautify, activities we try to create, all these things mean so much. Because before they get to Chatham-Kent, I can guarantee you that they already know whether it's happening or not, because they do a lot of work on us before they get here. So these are types of things when you're investing in yourself that I think go an awful long way in showing someone that if we believe in ourselves, then why wouldn't they believe in us? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and it did. And you kind of went where I was going in one aspect. And the other, just the second component of that would be in regards to the fact that right now with your staffing aspect, my guess would be if this position was not, let's say, maybe if there was a little bit of downtime, I'm sure that, you know, as a even economic development officer, even though they might be in a specific sector, that they would still be trained to assist and navigate the components of other aspects in your business at some point. So not that we would just utilize this for this only, that they could bring other elements to the table in regards to, we're seeing a lot of increase in businesses, ribbon cuttings, those types of things. Initially, I wasn't going to support this. Councillor Thompson's amendment assisted in that somewhat, but I think that it's not really, some of these things that come to council from a financial ask is not always able to quantify based on numbers alone. I think it's important to see, you know, this would have a spinoff on our restaurant industry, on our hospitality industry, you know, the night industry, all those types of things. And if it goes well, I mean, you know, this is a great thing for our community. If it doesn't go well over the first, you know, year, I'm sure that you can utilize this person for some other components if there's some downtime. Is that a fair assumption? Because I went through basically the job description and the essential responsibilities, and it does say it's not limited to. So there could still be utilization if there was some downtime to assist in maybe bettering us in some other areas as well. Is that a fair assumption?
Well, Madam Chair, through you, I think it's a very fair assumption. I think Council remember last year and a half ago, we went from 6 to 5 ECDEV officers. And again, as you talk about the increase in commercial investment in Chatham-Kent over the last little while, which you'll find out in Cora's report in the upcoming budget, you'll see that's grown exponentially. So anything we can do to work together as a team to, you know, we'll learn from each other. And again, yes, we'll make sure that person is extremely busy. And hence the reason as we come for this position, because right now I didn't feel comfortable saying we can just run this off the side of someone's desk. If we're going to find out whether or not it works and whether it's right for Chatham-Kent, we need to give it the effort that it requires.
Thank you, sir. That's exactly where it was intended to go in regards to the staffing aspects, that we've actually reduced that area and we're expanding business. So I think that it makes it a little bit easier to support it for 1 year. Thank you.
Mayor Canna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got a few points as listening to everyone. Before I put this out, we've done a lot of work, and I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, directors, producers, investors, and I want this to be successful, and I believe it will be. if we do it right. And the first start is we need to adequately resource it. If you put it on the side of a desk or hire a student, you're not going to get that same effect as if you put somebody there that's going to be a concierge for this business for 1 year, to go out there and promote business and be able to talk about the community and talk about intelligently about it. So I think that's where we start with. And we're looking at arts and culture renaissance in Chatham-Kent. As we're doing all the things we're doing, this is part of that. The Flick office, when I was at the Toronto Film Festival, when we mentioned that, people lit up. Wow, Chatham-Kent. The amount of people said, Chatham-Kent's doing it, wow. And they started talking about it. But one of the key pieces is that concierge, that person to link people. It also forms kind of that place for people who want to live. It's one more aspect that people can talk about Chatham-Kent, where if you're in Hamilton, all of a sudden, wow, the next Schitt's Creek was filmed in Chatham-Kent. I always wanted to say that on the microphone. But it's that exposure of the province and people talking about it. It's that extra buzz. If we want somebody youthful to want to move here, it's that other thing. You've got the film industry. I look at this as return on investment. In the report, it talks about 8 different aspects of it, and certainly the direct financial, the jobs and those things, but there's so many other things that flow from this. And I think if we do it right, I believe it will be a thriving industry. We can make it that. I spoke with the person in Sudbury, and she has the same role as what we're looking at hiring right now. She says, you know, Sudbury was like you were about 1.5 years ago, and I said, we're booming here because there's a marketplace outside of the GTA for filming. If we do it right, we will have lots of people filming here, but we have to do it right. If we do it wrong, yes, you're right, 1 year from now, we're looking to say, you know, it didn't work so well because we didn't put the resources in it. So we work hard for 1 year to establishment. If it works, which I hope it will, and I think it will, I think it's going to create a lot of excitement in our community, but it's going to be a viable industry in Chatham-Kent to create jobs and things. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everyone. We'll put this to vote and we'll do our switch.
Councillor Finn.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-3. Sorry. Interesting.
Item 22, Infrastructure and Engineering Services.
22A, Road Safety Action Plan.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Story, can I get you to move this, please?
Yes, happy to move the recommendations, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harrigan, floor is yours.
Great, thank you, and I will try to be speedy to get us all to bed on time. But thank you so much for this report and preparing this report. Truthfully, I pulled it in hopes that maybe some media might pick it up because I think it's really, really great work. I was very disheartened to see some of the statistics about pedestrian injuries and deaths in Chatham-Kent in comparison to the rest of the project. But then I was really reassured to see that the vision when it comes to our road safety action plan is really a vision of Vision Zero. So through the Mayor, Marissa, can you please explain to us what Vision Zero means?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all of our road users. So in our report, we identified some key principles. At the crux of that is that road crash deaths are unacceptable and preventable. And through our plan, we've assessed our collision data, our history, and our trends. And we've identified some emphasis areas and 25 recommended action items. Out of this, that forms our strategy.
Great, thank you. And I'm not going to ask you to go into the recommendation or the recommended action items this evening, but I am wondering if it's possible for IES to work with our communications team to release a media release if this does go through tonight, sharing some highlights of the strategy and maybe identifying ways that the community can be more aware of it and things that partners might be able to do to help us achieve our goal of Vision Zero.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so definitely a news release can be issued, and we're working with our communications colleagues over the next few months. We'll be doing a lot to issue some communications for the initiatives and recommended action items that come from this. So absolutely, yes.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Harrigan, I completely agree with everything that you just said, so thank you for those questions and comments. I am really encouraged to see Vision Zero coming up into the discussion in this community. It is a really important policy that a lot of communities across, globally actually, are taking on. Road safety is something that's really a strong priority for me personally. Today would be my friend Sarah Miles Payne birthday, who lost her life because of the lack of safety infrastructure on our roads in this region. So I was, similar to Councillor Harrigan, I was surprised actually. I did not realize why we have fatality rates that are double the provincial average for collisions on our roadways. Could you shed a little more light on that troubling statistic and why that might be and why that's happening here in Chatham-Kent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't have a singular answer for you. It's a great question. What I can say is that through this process, we did look at our collision statistics and broke that down into more detailed data sets and identified trends. So I think in Appendix A of the report, we contain some of that information. So for example, we identified that alcohol-related collisions are a high statistic for us. We do have a pretty unique geographic kind of diversity of our roads, right? So we have a lot of rural roads, we have a lot of urban roads, and so our emphasis areas and our recommended actions in the plan are tailored to respond to those trends of collisions and fatalities and major injuries that we identified that were trending in the wrong direction.
Thank you for that. The impaired driving rates are in 2023 boggle my mind that that's still a concern to such a significant extent in Chatham-Kent. So I really hope as a community we can do better with that. And I support, Vision Zero is just that, right? It means 0 fatalities from collisions, and there are places in the world that they have achieved that. So it's the fact that it's hard to imagine that scenario, but it's being done. So I'm really encouraged by this. Final question. I see that the low and no cost options for this are going to be implemented immediately, which is great. How do we ensure the rest of this important work is also implemented? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's a great question. So yeah, so there are several low or no cost items working with our community partners, police, emergency services to work on education campaigns and a lot of items that just form part of the operational work that we do. There are several items that will be coming forward as part of this multi-year capital budget that come out of this plan. So some of them are also on the floor tonight for sidewalks and traffic calming, and others in terms of pedestrian crossings, guide rail, pavement markings, and other pieces will be coming forward in the multi-year capital budget.
Thank you. Your work is cut out for you, and I appreciate everything you're doing to move this forward, and the team at IES. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 22B, traffic calming policy.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Allen, can I get you to move this, please?
Happy to move it, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to second.
Councillor Sakachi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Actually, Councillor Harrigan touched on a little bit of the questions I had for both of these. So in there, it just kind of speaks to the traffic calming review process and how it can be initiated. And I just wanted to see if how we were going to communicate to that residents. You know, you kind of mentioned our unique demographics. So obviously we have a lot of, secondary communities, a lot of larger communities, and all those arterial roadways makeup is a lot different than a large city. So, when you're coming into town or going by a school, especially in, communities like South Kent, sometimes you're coming off a highway. So I'm just curious to see that, like, our waterfront communities in the summertime, those areas like that have challenging aspects, can the media release touch also on the traffic calming policy, so our groups in those specialty areas can see exactly how to reach out and initiate processes for like speed humps and those types of things?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. So yeah, our news release can touch on that, and then some of the work that we'll be doing with our communications colleagues as we roll out these initiatives. We'll certainly use all of our social media and other communication tools to put word out on these items.
Thank you. And just in closing, a lot of times that we receive, I know Councillor Thompson and Councillor Doyle and myself, a lot of times that we receive these types of things in our area, it really kind of refers back to some of the, you know, waterfront communities, as I indicated, that have a heavy influx in traffic at certain times of year. So will you know, when they initiate these internal or external requests, is it going to be assured that we're going to be looking at these types of challenges when it's in the heart, you know, of the issue? For instance, if it's in Mitchell's Bay, Erio, Rondo Bay Estates, that we're going to be looking at the matters, you know, with the most feasible time frame, as like when they're the busiest, not doing the studies, you know, in the winter time when they might have like a 60 or 70% reduction in traffic?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely, that will be considered. So, like you noted, inquiries or requests can be initiated internally, externally at any time. So when we receive those concerns with the basis for it, we'll certainly be factoring that in when we're kind of assessing the specifics.
Thank you. A lot of people in the community, believe it or not, have been waiting for this policy to come out and the previous action plan. So I know it might be a dull read to some, but I know there's going to be a lot of community members that are very appreciative that we are moving along and moving this forward. So thank you.
Councillor McGrail?
Thank you, Mayor Canna. So obviously when this report is, and I agree completely with Councillor Sakachi that you're definitely perking interests when bringing this. So, you know, we've, as a municipality, through these different communities, and I'll make Mitchell's Bay my example, you know, we've had these discussions. You guys have come to, you know, the table and talked about these discussions within Mitchell's Bay. So going forward, I just want to touch a little bit more. Are you going to then go back, or are they going to have to reach out? Because obviously there's an ongoing dialogue there. So I know this is going to be definitely a question I'm going to have this month at the Mitchell's Bay Area Association meeting, is how do I start the process? Or because, you know, we thought we started the process already through our public engagement that you guys were brought into. How's that going to look?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess in terms of how can a resident initiate the process in general, so residents can reach out through our CK311 channels at any time to make a request, and then we would sort of start that initiation process. In respect to some that may have been in consideration before we had this policy, we can certainly work to look at some that may have come up recently that we could kind of start that process now.
Perfect, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
Is Councillor Bonner there? All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 22C, Sidewalk Network Completion Policy.
We'll go to the northeast corner. Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move this, please?
Very pleased to move it.
And second, I have some questions.
Okay, Councillor McGregor?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight this. I know that it was a policy that we kicked back in 2020 after quite a bit of debate, and I'm really pleased to see this new policy come forward and really recognize an opportunity to improve our community through expanding sidewalks in a way that's recognizing equity across the community. So I think it's a great policy, and certainly miles ahead of what we were looking at in 2020. So just wanted to thank you for bringing it back, and really looking forward to supporting it tonight. Thank you.
Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Great, thank you, Mayor Kenneth. So I have a couple questions here. Great report, but I really saw the urban side of the report. So can you please tell me what constitutes urban and what is rural? First, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the simplest, I guess, definition for a rural road or an urban road would be essentially the roads that fall within our rural and urban boundaries as defined under our official plan. Our official plan does have very technical, specific definitions for our rural and urban roads depending on their form and function. I guess to clarify in terms of that there is a lot of mention of the urban roads, sidewalks, and some mention of the rural road sidewalk considerations. To clarify what that means, certainly it's not that sidewalks can't be constructed along rural roads. It's to acknowledge that there may be rural road segments where a sidewalk wouldn't make sense and wouldn't provide benefit, but certainly there are certain rural roads where sidewalks would be important. A good example would be school areas. So we would certainly be working through with our school community partners to identify where those sidewalk segments are still important on rural areas, and that's what that kind of section is getting at.
Perfect, that's exactly what I was getting at, that we still have those rural schools, and they need to be looked at and taken care of too. So my second question is, I believe it's in Appendix A, is a list of projects, I'm gonna say, that are existing. So going to this new policy, what's gonna happen with existing projects going forward? Are they still gonna stay on the list, or are they gonna be reevaluated and then go from there? So what is the next, what will we expect from this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so that's a great question. So that list will be carried forward. So we'll be growing that list with new requests, and then annually we'll be reassessing what our priorities are for the year based on all of those requests that we have had to date and already evaluated, and any new requests that we receive as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor McGrail asked the majority of my questions, and I wanted to thank Marissa and team for the great report. And I want to echo Councillor McGregor's sentiments about this new sidewalk policy. So just a quick question and follow-up is, if individuals or residents believe that there should be a sidewalk somewhere in their community for safety or other reasons, how is it they might go about getting that information made known to your team?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we would encourage residents to reach out to us through our CK311 channels at any time to make that request, and then annually we'll be reviewing all of those requests that we've received, along with requests we've previously received, to develop those work plans.
Great, thank you so much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 22D, designated fire lanes, Erio.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Sakatchi, and I get you to move this please.
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to put it on the floor. Second it, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, Councillor Harrigan, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to make note that items 1 and 2 in these recommendations are really looking at us doing a bit of a new project that we're testing in the community of Erio, and hopefully it's successful and can expand to other areas. And the idea is that we have so many communities that do have potential access to waterways, but our public accesses aren't overly clear in terms of how residents can get to them, if it's safe to maneuver their kayaks or other non-motorized vehicles kind of down to them. And then as a result, we're kind of a community that's full of, surrounded by water, but without really any clear kind of clear ways to get there or tourism promotion around that. So this really lets us list some surplus property and recycle those funds into creating better public spaces. So I know that it may be challenging because it's our first go around, but certainly I hope that we can see some success, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of the community engagement that takes place, and maybe we get some sort of brand across Chatham-Kent for access to waterways for some of that recreational activity, for fishing and other non-motorized water sports. So I just wanted to make that comment, and I look forward to where this is going.
Councillor Sakatchi, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just wanted to first commend the fact that I did receive lots of communication and conversation regarding this item. A lot of community members in Erio have reached out. I know that they're very passionate about their village, and a lot of people are passionate about the history as well as the water access. Over the course of, I would say, the last few days, I've received significant questions in regards to some safety components parking, traffic, the purchasing aspects, the consultation piece, and the locations that are selected. So Edward, I just wanted to touch base with you in regards to next steps. So, you know, this is basically to get the direction, and then essentially the next steps are going to be reviewing in detail the components that, some of the components that I have mentioned in regards to the purchasing aspect, safety, you know, parking, and the consultation piece.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of this report, really is to provide direction to staff to go out and initiate those next steps. There's really two components. There's the component about selling off the properties, and the next step there really is to determine what is the highest and best use for each of those parcels. Taking into account that there is some encumbrances on some of those parcels. There could be water main, there could be a municipal drain, there could be providing access to a property. So working through that and working with our colleagues in planning, then determining, is that parcel viable to be sold off as a standalone parcel? Is it too small to be sold off to developed? And then, you know, that process would be different. Potentially putting it on the market as a buildable lot, or being provided as an option to maybe the neighbors in terms of being able to buy. So it's really about providing the greatest value, getting the greatest value out of those properties, and determining, you know, what's the highest and best use. So we'll be undertaking that work as we move forward, having consultation with the public as well on the kayaks, and dealing with those issues related to parking. So parking's a big issue down there in some of those locations, and how people access the water. So two streams really, disposal of the properties through the next steps, and then having that consultation with the community on the recreation opportunities.
Thanks, Edward. You did touch on it, so just to move forward, you know, your team is obviously very detailed oriented when it comes to the municipal assets that might be included in those locations. So just to say once again, to reiterate that any type of drain aspects, any type of concerns like that would be addressed specifically when those things are reviewed in detail, which would be the next exercise that the staff would be performing, correct?
Thank you, Your Worship, that's correct.
And then it would not be possible for me to speak with you briefly, Chief Case, in regards to the safety component, especially when it comes to the fire aspects. You know, obviously I know your detailed and you know, advocation for community safety. You will be, I'm guessing, engaged in this from the perspective from the fire component to ensure that the safety of the village is in peril to how we move forward.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, the designated fire lanes are an alternative source of water. It's not entirely safe going down in the middle of the night trying to throw a hose line into the water, and that's assuming it's not frozen over. So we're very keen to try and review the fleet so it negates the need to use those lanes, which are there for emergencies only, as you can imagine. So we're very keen to continue to work in partnership with our colleagues to make sure that we get the best of both worlds for the community of Erio.
Thank you. And just in closing, this is a very challenging aspect, I know for myself, having a long history with the village. In talking to about 12 people in the last several days, I had about 8 suggestions what we should do with the fire lanes, and only 2 of them there were the same. So it's very challenging because it went from enforcement, it went from divesting, it went from keeping, it went to you know, resurfacing them, you know, ensuring any people that had storage on them. It's a very, very, I know it seems like a small report, but it's a very complex issue. I just want to make sure that administration moves forward very sensitively as a very compassionate village, and that we are taking the consultation piece and addressing the safety, parking, and you know, the other additional alternatives for how the kayak or the launches will be designed. And we have a great community group down there, and that consulting would be at least considered with them as well. And I'll look forward to hearing additional comments. Thank you.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Anthony picked off some of the questions I was going to ask, just with the different responses we've seen from some of the public so far. And then I was going to ask Chief Case about what he thought to get rid of the fire lanes for fire use, and those are taken care of. So thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. Just a real quick question. How did we settle on Stas and a third as the two kayak launches? Or potential kayak launches?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff from Public Works and the fire department went out and looked at the various locations themselves. We wanted to ensure that if we are providing recreational opportunities, that they're equally spaced out in the community itself. A number of the fire lanes really wouldn't provide the opportunity. If you go on site and take a look at how the shoreline is actually constructed in that area, it wouldn't be really feasible. And then one of the consideration was there has to be parking in close proximity to those two locations. So third and Stas has some opportunity for parking. So if we're going to be directing people to launch their kayaks in that way, that it's not that far of a walk. So the other ones were not really conducive, I would say, for a kayak launch, just based on the shoreline configuration, and these ones had some opportunities there.
There we are. Thank you. So you touched on it. There won't be, I'll call it on-a-lane parking for the kayak launches, will there?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe there's one location where we have some opportunity to potentially put angled parking in that location.
Okay. Would that be third or Stas?
I would say it was Stas.
The one next to Bayside?
Sorry, third.
Third.
Base already has parking there that's associated
For
with the
their
restaurant.
business, right?
Yes, so
Okay.
it was third.
Yep, thank you very much, Edward. Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, other than the back of the fire hall, there is no actual public access to the bay in Erio. So I think this is clearly going to be something that, well, has the potential to be very contentious. I think it is a good opportunity to move the entire community of Erio forward. I know it's been a long time coming. I think it's really going to be incumbent upon us to take the public consultation seriously and to go above and beyond, because I've had some conversations with residents abutting Stas in particular, but most of them concerned in regards to the process going forward and what the future looks like for Erio. But I will be supporting this. I think it's an interesting process to move forward with, and one that the community of Erio will benefit from. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 22E, Strategic Asset Management Policy Update. We have a presentation by Sean Hilderly, Manager of Asset and Quality Management.
So I got to say that IES is rocking out of the park. They got 4 great plans and policies rolling out already, and here we got the 5th one coming up. No pressure here.
He's cleared the room. He's cleared the room.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council, for being here. My name's Sean Hilderly. I'm the new Asset and Quality Management Manager here. And I'm going to take you through what is asset management. It's probably not exactly what you think it is, and I'm going to provide a little bit of information and education to what your rules will be according to the legislation that the province has passed in 2018. You do have some direct responsibilities for delivering funding and setting service levels. And that's what these asset management plans really are about, is understanding what funding is required over the long term and allowing council to determine service levels for the community and directly linking that budget process to the outcomes that we deliver as a community. So today I'm going to take you through some of the benefits of asset management. I'm going to touch on that OREG timeline. It's very important. It's very condensed, what we've done so far, and the new concept of who the asset owners are, because it may not align with what you've historically thought of as the asset owners in the past. It's important you understand that, so that when you're making decisions in the future over the next coming years as these plans come to council, that you understand what your roles and responsibilities are, and understanding how we're going to present that information to you to be able to make these choices. I always like to start off with the carrot, asset management, the benefits of asset management. I'm a big fan of asset management. Does it improve the budgeting process? Yes. Does that mean that it's going to improve Gord's finance approach? No. It just means that we're going to come into that process a little more prepared with a better plan to allow that those conversations within budget are very poignant and are able to link directly to the levels of service that we deliver. It allows councillors to have a better understanding of what the asset needs over time in the near and the long term. We have a 10-year planning horizon mandated by the province. We need to think about all of our services in a 10-year window at bare minimum. That's a new thing for this municipality. We haven't typically looked that long term. However, assets are very long-lived. Roads, pipes under the ground can last anywhere from 50 to 100 years. We want to make sure that when we're making choices today for what we're acquiring for assets, that we're ensuring we have the proper amounts of money and funding set aside to take care of those assets over the long term. The detailed asset management plans themselves are a clear and concise document. They behave a lot like a business plan, a financial plan, a review of how we operate the service, and it's written to be assurance to the public. As stewards of public infrastructure and the services that we deliver, it's incumbent upon us to be able to communicate clearly and effectively with the public what levels of service we are going to be able to deliver, not only over the near term, but over the long term, and ensure that we're creating intergenerational equity. It's a very important concept that we live and breathe inside of asset management is intergenerational equity, making sure that we don't unfairly burden future generations by not properly taking care of what we have today. The plans also are supposed to inform decision makers. That's you sitting around this horseshoe. We want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what we own, what financial commitments are required in the future. And if you think about the life cycle, we want to make sure that we're appropriately funding those life cycle amounts. These plans will help us determine that whether we're putting enough in or not enough. It will also in turn improve internal processes such risk, demand, and planning, gives us further understanding, and these plans will clearly detail the implications of the service if we can't manage them properly. We have to outline those to the public, that if we're not able to maintain a certain level of service, we need to explain the levels, the impacts of that. Closing hours or improving hours. We want to make sure that whatever you decide to invest in, we can detail the advantages and the implications of that. So this is the stick part of it. So not only do we have a carrot, there's lots of really good things about it, but we have a stick, and that's the provincial legislation that says we shall do this. And this legislation came out in 2017, was passed and enacted in 2018 under the Jobs and Prosperity Act. It's OREG 588/17. It said to us that we were supposed to have an asset management, strategic asset management policy done. We did that in 2019, and there's one here before you tonight that got passed through that does make sure that we are compliant with the OREG regulation, okay? In July 1st, 2022, you saw the core asset management plans. That's for transportation, roads and engineered structures. That's bridges and culverts, anything over 3 meters. Waterworks, so that's water, wastewater, and stormwater to the current levels of service and the cost to maintain. That means what are we doing today and how much does it cost us? But July 1st, 2024, we need to do asset management plans for every other service that we have. That's a very tight deadline. That's a very short window and opportunity to be able to do that, but we are incumbent to do so. So we have set aside an approach which will take you through that in the future. You are going to see an awful lot of plans in a very short order about all of our services. So it's very important that you understand what these plans mean and understand how to read them and understand how to endorse them, because you will be asked to endorse each plan. In July 1st, 2025, we need to redo all of those plans to the proposed levels of service. Another interesting challenge, but we will accept that and we will make sure that we meet those goals. That is for you to be able to say, we are expecting to deliver this level of service today and over the next 10 years. So this is where understanding what these asset management plans are for you as decision makers, you'll be helping to set those levels of service that your community receives and understanding the dollars required to deliver that level of service. I always say asset management, we look at things, but there's 10 degrees to the right from how you've typically looked at things. It's a new way of looking at things here in Ontario. It's not new internationally. This approach has been done all over the world. I could list all the countries that have done it for 30, 35 years. We're just a little late to the party. So now what we're going to do is catch ourselves up by adopting the IPWIA methodology and applying it to all of our services so that you have a distinct plan in front of you that details what the service does, what it costs, and what we're intending to do over the next 10 years. So what have we done in response to the legislation? We formed our department. We've adopted the IPWIA methodology. That's a methodology that was basically the foundation for the ISO 55000 standard that's been accepted out there since 2014, updated in 2019, again updated in 2023. This is an international standard that's been accepted, so we're just going to follow that model. We're not going to invent anything new. We're going to take what's successful and we're going to apply it to Chatham-Kent. We finalized an education program for staff, and part of this is actually speaking with you, Council, tonight to understand the roles and responsibilities of what will be happening for you in the future and all the reports that you're going to be coming to you on a very, very regular basis. And then we've created a project plan to meet those very, very tight deadlines. Understanding what we mean by an asset owner definition, so that who owns the assets. Typically, we have segregated things into silos, but ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're trying to be able to say to council and to the public what it costs to deliver a service. So you think of fire, police, okay, roads, water, wastewater, parks and recreation. We want to compile all the assets and resources that are required to deliver that service to the public so that they understand what those costs are and they understand what services they're delivering, because we do deliver an awful lot of value to the community, and this is our chance to demonstrate what value we are actually delivering. Okay, so the asset owner is the person that has the direct responsibility for the operation of provisions of service. So when we're talking about fire, sort of use you as a guinea pig here, we want to talk about the buildings that they have, the trucks that they have, the staffing, the equipment that they need, all the costs that go into delivering a fire service. The community has a very good understanding what they can expect for the dollars that are invested and the value that they receive. Next part, I'm just going to go over what's within these actual plans. The plans that you're going to receive upcoming in the future, they're providing a complete picture, as I always like to say. Okay, so this is a very simplistic view. I apologize, don't giggle too much. This is just a very simplistic view of what the plans will be able to do. Let's say council is looking at providing a brand new park. We want to be able to demonstrate some of the options of what level of service you're going to be providing when you say, I'd like a new park. If you have the park on the left, it's just going to have some open space, some picnic tables, a sign, some trees, and it's going to get its grass mowed on a regular basis. It's going to cost you a $1 sign. If you want that park that's got the baseball diamond and the basketball court, it's got a lot of trees, a lot of bleachers, it's got some garbage cans that need to be taken care of on a regular basis, we're going to let you know that's going to cost you $2 signs on an annual basis. And if you want that elaborate park that's got the cascading waterfalls and the grass is mowed weekly and there's all sorts of amenities that go into that, I won't go on to all of them that could possibly be there, we're going to let you know that's going to cost you $3 signs on an annual basis. We don't want to think of things anymore of what it costs to build. We want to think of things what the whole life cost it is to own, operate, maintain, and keep it at a defined level of service over time. And that's what we try to do within our asset management plans. Allow you to have the options of understanding that if you want Park A, Park B, or Park C, that not only do you need the money set aside to build it, you need to have the money set aside to be able to take care of it over the long term. That's what these plans intend to do. So we want everybody to start thinking about the annual average cost. That's the $. What's it going to cost for you on an annual basis to build, operate, maintain, and then either dispose of or renew that asset? We need to make sure that everyone understands that annual average cost, and that allows us to optimize our choices in the future. So I'm going to take you through the detailed asset management plans. These are systematic plans, and this is what I mean by the IPWIA methodology that's been so successful everywhere. There are 8 distinct chapters that go into an asset management plan, and this allows us to compare services in a unique way that we've never ever been able to do that before. It's hard to compare roads to a park to a fire. These plans allow us to be able to talk about the services that we're delivering, the value that they bring, and where investment is required. Because you have a finite amount of resources, and you have ample opportunity to choose where it goes. Unfortunately, it's not an endless supply of money. So we need to be able to make constructive and positive choices in what we're doing, and these plans allow us to do that. They'll each have a background section, and that will talk about why we deliver the service, the history of the service, and then it'll talk about the registry. So it means, what do we own? So if you think of fire or parks, we have playgrounds, we have trucks, we have buildings. We want to make sure that you understand the large implication of what we actually own and talk about their condition, age, and expected life and the replacement costs. Those are some of the key measurements. Then we go into a section called life cycle, and that's how do we take care of them over their entire life, from cradle to grave. From the time that we decide to acquire something to the time that we either decide to renew or dispose of that asset. Those costs will be known. And then we really want to get into a section called demand. And that's where we're talking about what is the key drivers for why we have these services in the first place. And I'll have another slide a little bit later that touches on what those are. But really, we want to make sure that we're measuring both current and future demand so that we understand what those demand changes are today and what they are over time. We want to look at them on a regular basis because what your community wants change over time. And we better make sure that we're engaging and making sure that we're measuring those demands over time. Risk, that's another section. We know that we always talk about risk, but this one really focuses on those key areas up there that you'll see: financial risk, environmental risk, reductions to levels of service, legal and reputational risk, cultural and social outcomes. We'll touch on those for all of our services. Some will exceed, we'll have a lot more input on many of those, and some will not, but we want to make sure that we're at least all measuring the same thing at the same time. Levels of service, it's a concept that's been kicked around by everybody. We have a very defined way that we measure our levels of service. It's talking about costs, risk, and performance, and understanding when those are all acceptable, that's the level of service that we're going to set. So we're going to make sure that we go through and talk about the levels of service that we're trying to set, and we look at them from two perspectives. The customer perspective, so is the customer happy with what we're delivering? We go out and engage with the customer and talk about our service and say, how happy are you with this service? What works for you? What doesn't work? What would you like to see in the future? And then we look at technical levels of service. That's internal measurements for every single department to prove that we're managing our assets in a very responsible manner. Those can be, are we staying on budget? Are we finishing all the projects that we start? These are technical measures that will clearly communicate to council and the public how effectively we are being good stewards of these assets and services that we deliver. We have a section on climate change to address all the priorities and strategies to make sure that everyone is addressing them. And then we have a financial section. I'm a finance person through and through. This is where I started my municipal career. It's the backbone of the plan because all those previous sections require resourcing. When you're talking about demand, when you're talking about life cycle, when you're talking about why we're building, what we're building, and how we're maintaining it, they all require resources. And we want to make sure that we have a financial plan that demonstrates that it is feasible for us to be able to do these things. Without it, then we've misrepresented what our levels of service should be. We have to be able to fund those levels of service over time. If we can't demonstrate that, we have to take a really good look at the levels of service that we're delivering and find opportunities to be able to match them with our budget. And then we have a continuous improvement section here, and that's really about making sure that we go through to every single one of our services and have conversations with them and say, as we go through this asset management planning process, we will identify many, many opportunities for us to improve internally. And we want to make sure that that is put into our plan and it demonstrates who's doing what, how much it will cost, and when it will be done by. And these will be key drivers into work plans for everybody internally for staff so that we're demonstrating we are getting better over time. There's a couple quick slides here that I'm going to touch on. Demand. As we can say, why do we have these services? Population change is a key driver, regulatory changes, maybe we have some provincial legislation or federal legislation that you shall do this. I'd like to call your attention to the top bolded feature there is council priorities. So you've done a strategic plan that outlines your council priorities. Right here, we utilize these as demand drivers to operationalize what you've set out in your strategic plan, and we are now pushing these through all of our services. So when you had goals and objectives in your plan, in your strategy, this operationalizes it into the actual plans and budget of what you would like to achieve or your council term. We utilize these plans to leverage those. So just if you're wondering how do we connect those dots, that's how we do it. Some of our risk categories I've already gone over, so I'll flip by that. This is the levels of service diagram that I always showed everybody. Level of service is when you're happy with the cost for something and the risk is acceptable and the performance that we're delivering is acceptable, that's how we're going to define what our level of service is. Every single service is going to define it the exact same way so it's measurable and comparable. We also have a couple of long-term financial goals with these detailed asset management plans. We want to work with finance and help create a long-term financial plan that connects these plans to the budget process so that there is an iterative conversation that happens between you and staff and the public to be able to say, this is what it's going to cost over the long term, and are you happy with that? We have to have that conversation. And as their wants and the public's wants and needs change over time, we need to recognize that and work it through that long-term financial plan. We also want to make sure these plans can define exactly what level of service we are delivering so you can communicate that with your constituents, with the public, and people who call and just wonder what we're doing and how we're doing it. This is an example I use at every single spot that I am. This is a legitimate council that I worked at. And I just use this as an example of what we're going to do here is that we're going to talk about, this is the Bridges and Culvert program for a municipality. The blue bars are all the projects that needed to be done over a 10-year period, and the black bar represents what the annual average cost was. Remember I was talking about that annual average cost? So if council were to give us $450,000 each year over those 10 years, we would have been able to accomplish all those projects. And it's hard to see, but down at the bottom there's a yellow line. And that's the current dedicated funding the council gave us to be able to deal with those needs and projects. Difficult to get those projects done if we don't have those resources to do it. An interesting problem happens when that happened is that you'll notice the orange bar there, this is the next year. When those projects didn't get done, those first 2 years got compounded. That orange bar is now our backlog of projects that we needed to get done. And off to the right, in the 11th year, that is now the 10th year, a brand new project came in. And we no longer needed $450,000 from council, we needed $560,000 on an annual basis to deal with these projects upcoming. So this shows you the backlog or the infrastructure, the creation of an infrastructure gap. That's where this slide comes in handy. We are going to identify what infrastructure gap we have. And for you to be able to deal with that infrastructure gap, you have to understand what the concept of it is. It's the difference between what we are spending and what we're recommending should be spent over time. This is the challenge of all councils. All 444 municipalities in Ontario are dealing with this exact problem right now. I've never been to a municipality that did not have an infrastructure gap, and we are definitely going to find ours here. The question is, how do we deal with it? Because you're not going to eliminate it in the very first year. Please don't set your sights on that. How we're going to deal with it is over time, and we have some options. We can do nothing, which sometimes happens, but you're going to see what happens if we do nothing. The assets will degrade, service levels will decrease, customers will become unsatisfied, reputational damage. These are some of the outcomes if we do nothing. My recommendation is a wonderful blend of the other 4 options. Okay, we may need to defer some projects out. We may need to look at disposing and closing of certain assets that are underutilized and don't hold a lot of value. There's opportunities for that. There might be a reduction of expected levels of service so that it becomes financially responsible and available for us to be able to fund that. And there are other opportunities to fund the gap in other areas. But I would like to recommend that we don't try to do this all at once. It's an overtime iterative process. What we need to do is identify that gap and then come up with options utilizing those management tactics to be able to manage that gap over time. The idea is to eliminate it over time. You're not going to do it in the first year. These plans are very long-term 10-year windows for a reason, because getting to that point will take us a little while. So the program and the plan, this is what we're going to do with you, council, over the next little while. My department is going to work with all of the other services, and what we're going to do is develop these asset management plans to bring to you, to council, for you to consider and then approve. Okay, the first plan that we're going to deliver in 2024, all the ones that you'll see, I'd like you to note that they will not be perfect. They will be reasonable and useful. The reason they won't be perfect is right to the next point. It's impossible for us to gather all the data that we have and identify what we're missing in the very little timeline that we do have. This will be improved over time. That's the third point. We will start with the first plan in 2024. That will get us to a good starting spot. The second plan will be even better, okay? It'll get you more details, more information. You'll be able to utilize those even better. The third plan that we're planning to do is in 2027, which is right before we do our next multi-year budget, so that you have very, very good, well-documented plans of what we're expecting to be able to do. When you go into that multi-year budget deliberation, you'll be able to start connecting investment dollars to level of service outcomes that you can deliver to your community. So They will not be perfect the first time around. These get better over time. It takes years to make these excellent plans, but my goal is by the third year, right before the multi-year budget, I talked with Gord about this, that they should be in a very fine place for us to be able to utilize to inform our budget choices. This is the work plan outline of the plans that you're going to see. There's a lot of plans there. It's like a whole bunch. So you're going to see these when they come to you. You're going to see fleet, facilities. I'm not going to read them all off, but these are the timelines of when we're expecting to get these done. They're tight deadlines. We might be able to get you some a little bit early. That's our goal, but these are when they have to be into you by. So you're going to see a bunch come through. We're trying to space them out so that you can read them, understand them, ask questions, and then approve them. And I'd just like to highlight this part of the strategic asset management policy. These are some of the mayor and council legislative roles and responsibilities. This is when, so you understand the plans. Now we have some things that we actually have to do as a council here. You've adopted that strategic asset management policy, and you're responsible for allocating the resources to deliver the plans, the outcomes of those plans. Your jobs will be to set and support current and proposed levels of service when you decide upon them. Regularly review the detailed asset management plans and long-term financial plans required to support them because they will change and evolve over time. These aren't plans to be sit on a shelf and never to be used. These will be updated on an annual basis. So you'll have updated information on a regular basis. There is an annual asset management update report that you will see on an annual basis as well too. That will be your job to read that, adopt it, and then resource it as you see appropriate to deal with the faults in the plans themselves. And then there's a resolution that you have to adopt with each and every single asset management plan. That means you're putting your stamp on those plans and saying, yes, we are accepting this level of service. This is what we want staff to strive for. This is the level of service, and these are the resources that we will be applying to ensure that those levels of service are deliverable. Okay? Any questions?
Councillor Story, then Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You are the perfect person to speak to us after 9 o'clock at night. That was energy and enthusiasm that I very much appreciate, so thank you, Sean. That was a lot of very useful information. Wow. Question about the approach to asset management when we're thinking about acquiring new buildings. I'm just thinking about our discussion tonight. How do we use this framework for, let's say, building a transitional housing facility or a shelter? Is this the framework we would use for acquiring new buildings or just the current buildings we have? Or is this basically a universal approach that we're going to apply across the board to every, like, disposition of assets, acquisition of assets, maintenance of current assets? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to you. Yes, we would indeed utilize this to make future decisions on acquisitions, and we would make sure that what we try to do is when you want to acquire something, we want to make sure that we do some estimation of what it's going to cost to operate and maintain, and then at some point in time either renew or dispose of that asset, so you get that annual average cost and you understand what you're going to be resourcing. So yes, I would recommend that.
And would that be, again, since we have an active project that we were discussing, would you be sitting at that table with the housing services people, just to use this example, but from the beginning to use that approach from step one, or would you be coming in at a later date once they've done a certain level of research and investigation, or where do you come into the process?
Great question, thank you. Yes, we come in at ultimately these are plans. So we want to come in at the beginning end of the process and speak to each service and say, what are you thinking of building? And if they say they're thinking of building some transitional housing or whatnot, we would then go into a life cycle exercise with them to understand what those whole life costs would be and make sure that they've got their ducks in a row and understanding what those lifetime costs are to make sure that when they come to council, they provide the options to be able to say A, B, or C. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Story, can I get you move this while I got you there? And then Councillor Harrigan, can I second that?
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Harrigan, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Sean, for that presentation. So oftentimes, previous to this presentation, we talked about capital and life cycle. Does this plan encourage us to continue thinking about things in terms of capital and life cycle, or are we thinking now asset management in a more kind of wholesome way, following best practice?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, what we're going to do with the asset management plans is to identify all the costs, including capital and life cycle. So we look at things from a whole life perspective, but that doesn't change the budgeting process of GORD of identifying things as either capital or operating wise. As we move through the asset management journey and as we become more familiar with the terminology and approaches, we would definitely sit down with finance and try to come up with a way where we're communicating a unified language of that. But yes, there's no difference. I mean, right now, those capital and operating budgets will continue along as they are.
Right, and so I think it's easy for me to wrap my head around levels of service when we talk about some of, especially the earlier asset management plans that you had in your report, right? Like Parks and Rec is kind of easy to understand, right? Is the pool, how much is that pool gonna cost? Are we gonna keep all the pools? Do we need less pools, et cetera? But how does levels of service work for something like, and look out, people will know, storm sewers? So we have communities and we have houses, and underneath we have storm sewers, and we need to provide that service. And it's not like we can say, oh, you're all gonna get the turbo storm sewer, like it's whatever is under the asphalt, right? So how does that work when we're making decisions about levels of services in some of the communities where we've got challenges and we know we don't have enough money to fix those challenges?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. What we would try to do then, if you're looking for opportunities to, should we be able to deliver a level of service, we want to identify what all those costs are and then work with budget, with finance and budget to be able to determine what's the best way to make that happen. Is it appropriate to take on debt? Is it appropriate to area rate? Is it appropriate? How are we going to be able to pay for that? So it's almost two sides of the coin. The asset management side is the expense side of things, what we'd like to deliver expense-wise. Then unfortunately, finance has the unenviable task of wrapping us on the knuckles and saying we can only afford X, Y, and Z. So there would be a conversation that would happen between everybody at the table.
Great, thank you. This stuff really makes me tick. I really like it, but I recognize that it's 9:30, so maybe we can have a follow-up conversation about it. I think that as a council, as we go through these individual plans, we'll actually get better and better at doing them. I noticed all of the big, scary, hard ones are at the end. Because we had already addressed them in previous years. So by then we'll be a bit more experienced. I look forward to that. And I just think the one caution I would maybe throw out there is that if we're talking about levels of service for things that are underneath cement and that are providing kind of services to people's houses, we can't really choose between, $1, $2, $3. We're in a lot of ways choosing between something that's functional or something that's suddenly not functional and is hundreds of millions of dollars to fix. So we'll have to work through that as we go through asset management planning. Thank you.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it, Sean. My question is, obviously you mentioned we're going to be getting some reports and detailed reports about all the departments and everything, and you mentioned about levels of service and everything. So obviously, the municipality provides these services with staffing and with the great professionals that we have across the municipality. But I guess my question, I don't know if it's to Kathy or it's to you, but how is some of our practices and policies, I guess, with HR and with hiring good people, for different roles? How does that relate to this? Like, are you going to be working hand in hand, I guess, with HR and some of the work that we do with attracting good quality talent all across all our departments? But how does that kind of tie into some of these reports we're going to be getting?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I'm going to start, and then I'm sure Nancy's going to, Kathy's going to chime in. When we come back to you with the asset management plans, we're going to identify, as Sean said to you, the gaps that we need to address in terms of dealing with infrastructure. And, council the last number of years has been putting money into the asset management plan, 1%, 1.5%. What we haven't done is come back to you with an implementation plan on how we're actually going to spend that money. You can't give us $20 million more for a type of asset without having some sort of implementation plan. That's going to mean more staffing, potentially, to actually implement that. So that's really where your question goes. How do we then attract that staff that we can build up the staffing that we need to actually implement that. And I'm sure that's where Kathy's going to jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Hall. It's an interesting one. When Sean and team first started to talk with the executive team about the asset management plan and presentations with the balance of our senior management team and other, the balance that are affected by it, at first we sort of scratched our head and said, like, how does that apply to every one of our units in the organization? If it wasn't like a table or a hard thing, how does this actually come together? How is everyone impacted by it? And they had some great presentations for the team to talk about asset owners and where they all become applicable throughout the organization. And we had our human resources team there present during the presentations as well, and took away conversations about how this intersects the work that we're doing on the HR strategy side of things, because part of this is also about culture, right? It's a different porthole into the discussion about culture. And so we've been weaving some of these steps and requirements into the strategy and thinking about what do we have to modify by the way of how we're attracting talent in order to get people in the organization that come with these kind of skills and approach the work in this kind of method, because it is a shift in how we think. And I would say the other place where we've connected the dots is through our EMT deliberations of the draft budget. We've each turned our minds to what the staffing requirements are in order to fulfill these obligations and come up with sustainable plans. And so when council has an opportunity to deliberate over those, they'll be able to make some decisions about where you best see the staffing that we're making recommendations for fit. So they're all dovetailing together.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Sean, you got a clean sweep there. Good first presentation. We'll move to notice of motion. Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I, Councillor Anthony Sakachi, here provide notice. I'll be bringing the following motion for voting discussion on the November 27th meeting of council. Whereas crosswalks are an integral component of transportation network that distinctly indicates safe roadway crossings, locations for pedestrians by means of lines or other markings on the surface of the roadway, and whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent has an existing decorative crosswalk guideline in which the cost of installing and maintaining a decorative crosswalks will have an impact on capital and existing operational costs, and whereas a person or agency requesting decorative crosswalks shall share in all parts of the cost, be it resolved that the municipality of Chatham-Kent, one, utilize the Let's Talk Chatham-Kent to see if there's any community partners that are interested in partnering with the municipality to develop a crosswalk dedicated to our veterans. Two, identify strategic locations throughout the municipality that dedicated crosswalks can be implemented on or at veterans. And three, consult with community partners if there is an interest through the page portal. And whereas council members have been allocated for funds for various projects throughout the wards of Chatham-Kent, be it further resolved that the municipality of Chatham-Kent identify if these funds can be utilized for future projects if there is community support.
Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Rhonda Jubenville, will be bringing the following notice of motion forward for discussion and voting at the November 27th meeting of council. Whereas the Council of the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole is to provide input and perspectives on strategic natural heritage matters relating to municipally led initiatives, including Council's woodlot preservation motion, the municipality's natural heritage implementation strategy, urban and municipal trees and natural areas, and the development of the natural heritage system required by the province as part of the update to the official plan. And whereas Section 5 of the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole states following the 2022 municipal election, Council should review the committee terms of reference and composition. And whereas Council repealed the temporary clear-cutting bylaw and reinstated the Natural Heritage Strategy at the September 25th, 2023 Council meeting, and whereas the incentive options for woodlot conservation failed at the October 30, 2023 Council meeting, therefore, be it resolved that the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole be dissolved as it no longer serves a need at this time, and this committee can be reinstated at any future time if needed. Thank you.
Closed session reports, Councillor Crew, and can I get Councillor Finn to second that?
Council directed administration on a proposed disposition of land by the municipality with regard to offer to purchase 19-23 Main Street, Bridgetown, Section 239 2C of the Municipal Act 2001. We directed personnel matter about an identifiable individual with regard to the Chatham-Kent Accessibility Advisory Committee, Section 239 2B of the Municipal Act. Council received information on a position, plan, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried out by the municipality with regard to the contract negotiations for the Marine Park Community of Mitchell's Bay, Section 239 2K, Municipal Act 2001. We received information on litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals regarding assessment review board hearing regarding 113 King Street West, Chatham, Section 239 2E of the Municipal Act. And we received information about personnel matters about identifiable individuals with respect to respectful workplace annual update, Section 239 2B of the Municipal Act 2001. So move.
Okay, I see no questions. Vote.
Counselor Finn?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Councillor Doyle, approval of communication items, Councillor Doyle and Councillor Hall, can I get you to move those, please?
I'll have you move that.
So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Non-agenda business. Councillor Juvenville, then Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Mayor. In light of recent news that was brought to Council's attention from the province regarding strong mayor powers, I was wondering if administration could provide an update to the public in respect of interest and transparency. Thank you.
I'll start. Thank you, Councillor Juvenville. So through you, Mayor, I know Council knows this, but I think this is more for the public. So we had made a number of requests to the province that they not provide strong mayor powers to Chatham-Kent. There was an initial letter from the mayor saying that he was not interested in strong mayor powers if it I guess the way it was worded was that we are interested in the funding that would be available, and he was interested in committing to the pledge, but not if it meant that Chatham-Kent was going to be provided with strong mayor powers. We never got a clear response to that, despite a number of phone calls and requests. So last week, around this time, we got direction from council to follow up yet again with the province and see if we can get clarification from them to the mayor's request, which is that we not be given strong mayor powers. And in fact, last week the direction was even if we are not able to participate in the funding, even though that we are actually the municipality is just leading the pack in terms of right across the province of those that are provided with a housing pledge, we're leading the pack and have already met our pledge for 2023. The direction from council was to advise the province that we weren't interested in strong mayor powers, even if that meant giving up the funding. The province responded in writing. Interesting, the original letter from the mayor was written on September 28th. We did not get a very clear response for quite some time. We sent a letter last Tuesday morning following direction from council, and we heard back from them, I believe, the next day. But unfortunately, their response was they're still providing a strong mayor power. So it has been provided to Chatham-Kent. So the mayor does have strong mayor powers and has the ability to exercise those powers if he wishes to. However, council, I advise council by a memo that the direction from the mayor is for administration to come forward with a report, which will set out how those powers, some of them at least, can be delegated to either council or to the CAO. So we don't have that report just yet. It's going to take a little bit of effort. There are other municipalities that have gone down this route, so it's not as if we're creating the approach from scratch. So Mr. Taylor's here, but Mr. Taylor will be working with Ms. Smith, and they'll be bringing forward a report to council at the mayor's request. And it'll open up the opportunity for the council, to ask the mayor, is he prepared to delegate these powers to either council and or the CAO, or a combination of both? That'll be up to you when the report comes forward. I hate to put Mr. Taylor on the spot, but any thoughts on when we might see that report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Michael, for the question. We're working away at it. Actually, I already have a first draft, and so I think it'll be in the next meeting or two of council, but we want to make sure to get it right as well.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And I should point out that the first group of municipalities that were provided with strong mayor powers, and I think some people thought we were part of that group, including the province, actually. But the first group were not given any choice at all. It was just legislated that these 29 municipalities had strong mayor powers. The second group, which we found ourselves in, the direction was that the mayor of the municipality could, without direction from council, just make a commitment to the pledge, and if he or she made that commitment, then the municipality would have strong mayor powers, or the mayor of that municipality would have strong mayor powers, and you'd be entitled to participate in the funding stream. But as some of you know, but again, this is more for the public, the mayor chose not to do that, and instead chose to ask council what approach they wanted to take. And that's what sort of set us down this path. So despite his efforts, I think, and I don't need to speak for him, he's right here, but despite his efforts to try to find a happy medium which would allow us to apply for funding and meet council's desire not to have strong mayor powers, that's not where the province has put us. And I guess I just remind people, I have to remind myself sometimes, that we are a creature of statute. We are a creature of the province, and so sometimes they do these things, and there's not a whole bunch that we can do about it. Having said that, if council wants to continue to advocate otherwise, we're always open to that kind of direction from council, and we'll follow suit. So I hope that answers. Where'd she go? Oh, there. Sorry, I didn't see. I hope that answers Councillor Jubenville's question.
Yes, thank you, Michael.
Okay, Councillor Pinsino, then Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Worship. The bank in Bothwell closed here a 3 weeks back, and it's left the community struggling to fill their financial needs. The small businesses are struggling. I see Stuart's gone, but is it possible for you or Mr. Dubin to talk with our ACDEV and see if maybe they can reach out to the local credit unions? We have several in the municipality, and see if somebody would be interested in going into that position in Bothwell.
I've already reached out to the local credit unions, let them know there's a gap, and if there's anything we can do to help them get there, that we'd be there to help them. So
awesome, you're a rock star. Thank you.
Councillor Finn.
Your Worship, yesterday I had the honor of being involved in an event held in Chatham for the first time. The Rucksack March for Remembrance was established to bring people from a community together to raise awareness and funding for the many Canadian military and first responders families who are fighting their own service-related battles every day. Every year, many dedicated soldiers, officers, firefighters, and paramedics are lost to illness, injury, and suicide. Yesterday, 29 participants put on backpacks weighing 22 kilograms and walked 22 kilometers around Kingston Park. It was quite emotional to watch each and every one of them pass, counting down the laps. They were supporting each other, talking along the way, and encouraged others to complete the laps. Owen Malott Bennett even stepped back a few steps to join John Enoch so that they could cross the finish line together in 3 hours and 23 minutes, I believe it was. So thank you to Ian Outhouse and his mom, Nancy, for organizing this event, and to all who walked, volunteered, donated, sponsored, or just came out to support them. Together, $9,500 was raised for wounded warriors. Congratulations, guys.
Councillor Story, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to recognize all the Legion branches around Chatham-Kent this week, all year round, but especially this week as we lead into Remembrance Day. If wherever you are in Chatham-Kent, there will be Remembrance Day service in your community, so I would encourage. It's on a Saturday this year, so I'm hoping that we'll get good turnouts from our communities across Chatham-Kent at our local Legions. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I wanted to wish Happy Diwali to all our community members who are celebrating the Festival of Lights, and thank the Chatham Hindu Cultural Association for inviting us to their celebration last night. And did also want to note that the CK Asian Cultural Association is hosting an event on November 18th. That's open to everyone. It's at Ursuline College. There's a dinner 5:30 to 6:30 that has a small cost associated, and then there's some performers and cultural programming for free from 6:45 to 10. So you can learn more about that on the DEIJ website through the municipality or through the CK Asian Cultural Association organizing committee. Thank you.
Okay, first and second reading, Councillor Pinsino, Councillor Bondi.
So moved, your worship. And seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading, B. McGregor and Councillor Hall.
So moved.
Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Over to Councillor Crew. And Councillor Allen, if you can wrap it up for us, that'd be great.
I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, November 20th, 2023, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. I so move.
So seconded.
Let's wrap her up at 9:47. Thanks, everybody.